Live. This is where I usually, well, back in the good old days before the DMCA stuff, you could like put on a little song and like rock out to the,
Yeah.
have a good little track playing in the background. But
Yeah,
I think we
literally
are.
I just had that conversation with Cadillac this morning because they
Yeah.
were like, hey, that event we're doing, like, we want to have a live stream. And I was like, wait, like
Yeah,
public,
exactly.
private.
Careful. Okay, howdy, folks. Thanks for joining us. We are just getting up and running over here. So if you are in the chat, say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Let's just make sure our little chat widget is working correctly as well. We're super excited. We're going to have a really fun conversation today with our beautiful guest, good friend of mine, which I'll introduce in a moment. Oh, yeah, I see. And Brandon, let me know if you're seeing the chat come in. You see that in the widget?
Yeah, I see good vibes.
Hello to you too, Andre. Thanks for joining us. We are watching both Twitch and YouTube chat, so feel free to hang out wherever you like to hang out in. I know there's some, and Twitch is now, they say the Twitch is now for old people too, I think, right? Like, are we old? Because I watch Twitch. Isn't it like TikTok where the newer generation is going?
I mean, I watch the shit out of some TikTok too, but I am also in this community. I am certainly an elder.
Yeah.
How old are you now? I'm 43.
32. Wow. I know. Okay, so everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from, and then we'll get started in about a minute as people join in, because this is going to be a really fun event, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We want to make sure that we get all our
talk about a lot of not touches on air. So, and yeah, by the way, for everyone, when I'm looking at my phone, it's because that's where I have the chat.
Yeah. No, we got the chat. Brandon's the kind of guy who he's like, I want to see the chat. I want to see the chat for sure.
Yeah.
Hello from Maine, Long Beach. Welcome everybody from Colombia. Thank you for joining us, my friends from Mumbai. How's everybody doing today? It's a Friday. That's a nice little situation. Hopefully.
Oh, I don't see a chat.
Yeah. We got our fellow from Twitch on Mumbai. Hello from East Coast USA. Where, let me tell you, if you're on the East Coast USA, let's enjoy, well, it depends on where on the East Coast, but let's enjoy the last moments of sunlight we get. Because it's already starting at like 10 degrees colder this week than last week. And
next week in New York is warmer.
Right now
it's super nice here. It's supposed to get into the 80s next week. Right now it's like 70s and sunny. It's so perfect.
Yeah, up in Toronto, it's starting to get a little bit chill. I'm wearing socks inside. It's like one of those situations. But
dude, at my house out in the mountains in LA, it's like 112.
Yeah. I'm not sure which one. Howdy, Rajat, my friend. How you doing? Okay, so we got a lot of folks joining in. I think we can get up and running here, and we'll get folks joining in a little bit late. That's okay. They'll catch up. Let me tell you, welcome to this live stream from the HQ. We've got a special guest here, Brandon Epperson. For your information, this is recorded. So you're watching live now on YouTube, maybe on Twitch, whichever one you're watching on. Right after we're done and we hit the stop, if there's something you missed along the way, feel free to jump back into it. The YouTube recording is available right after. Twitch is available right after. The Twitch one only does last for 90 days. Take that up with Amazon. That's not a setting we could really extend any longer. But the YouTube one is going to be available for the indefinite eternity of content. If we're going to get philosophical about it. But let's not get philosophical about that. So today we've got our special guest, very good friend of mine, longtime friend of mine. Actually, Brandon, so I didn't tell you I was going to tell you the story, but this is a story I always tell everybody about us.
Oh, really?
Which is that you're one of the only people, I think, or I should say few, just in case somebody's out there and they're like, what about me? But like one of the only memories I have where the job site is crazy, and it's one of my happiest working memories is me and you. And it was at Tiffany, and we worked. And for folks that like, they don't believe sometimes that like the job sites get crazy. Like we literally got to job site on like 9 a.m. one day and left on, what was it, like 5 or 6 a.m. the next morning.
Oh, at least if not later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so because and it was awesome because everybody left and me and Brandon were just on site in this big warehouse projection mapping, making the content. And me and you just worked through the whole night. We saw the sunrise together on the what was it, on the pier? I don't even remember
Yeah.
where that
On
is
the
to be. It
water.
was like
Yes.
on the water in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite memories of working, and it's always been a happy one and a
Oh,
chill
that's
one because
cool.
like me and you, we just like, what do we got to do? We got to do it. Bang, 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 bang. There's no weird egos, no nothing. We're just like, we're both here to complete
I
this
think
mission.
was that the night that we switched from lighting desk control to your control, mouse and keyboard?
Could have been. You had to
'Cause
touch,
that,
and then we loaded up like preset after preset and program and everything,
well,
visual effects and the whole thing.
yeah, because I remember that show. Well, that wasn't the only night we spent there with no
No, I
sleep.
know.
For some context for everyone,
Yeah,
this show
yeah,
was a giant projection show inside of a greenhouse. And so the only time you can work was at night. And
yeah.
then all during the day, I was also the tech director and building trucks and everything. So I
Yeah.
didn't sleep for days and days and days. But
I
yeah, there
remember.
was also the point where we went in and we thought we were going to control all 36 projectors and all this stuff like in a really finite manner. And then at the end of the day, it was like, Elbers, give me that one water clip everywhere.
Yeah.
Give me
And then
that.
we built that whole touch system for controlling stuff, and
Just in that one night. Yeah. Instead
yeah,
of using the desk. Yeah. That was a good
that
one.
was pretty fun.
That was one of my favorite shows I ever did too. I'm glad
It
you
was
have
a
a
lot
good
of fun.
memory of it because it was a
It
total
was fun.
bloodbath, and we
It
like
was.
nobody was sleeping.
Well, a lot of people were sleeping because there wasn't that many people overnight except like me, you, and maybe like a couple other stragglers and like the security guard.
Yeah,
But
I was making content in a mixture of like touch and BDMX, and you
yeah,
were working on the playback system.
and I remember you had the VDMX system feeding in. I think there was like an HDMI input or something feeding in for some effects.
Yeah,
Chilling.
yeah, silly.
Well, it's good to have you here, my friend.
Anyway,
With that kind of emotional introduction, just to introduce folks a little bit to you, Brandon is probably one of the, well, how do I even say, like the sharpest, smartest, proactive, capable, well-rounded. I know it's the blushing
stop.
I know, well-rounded, knows about so many different things. Like, and it's funny because I always, like, me and you, when we sit down to chat, like a lot of the time we don't even talk about touch designer because there's so many other things that we end up talking about, like talking about this and philosophy and life and like, oh, music and like this and that. And I think that's really going to show today as we start talking about all these different like topics that we had planned, because the title of this was from avant-garde theater to stadium shows and kind of everything in between, because your experience over the years with huge artists and brands, everybody from Kanye, Amazon, Nissan, Acura, Alicia Keys, like just all over the place in terms of working with huge brands, huge artists, putting on huge events, concerts, fashion shows, like everything. And I think your journey getting there and the background you come from is going to be a really interesting thing to talk about. So I think that's probably the first question that I would ask you a little bit is, obviously my introductions are very kind of personal and like what I know and all that stuff, but how would you introduce yourself to the folks watching, and even just if you're introducing yourself to somebody in the industry?
Yeah, that's actually one of the toughest questions. And I have people say to me a lot of times at parties and whatever, they go to introduce me and they're like, what do I say? Like, what do you, because it also depends on when you knew me, right?
Mm.
I got my start just as a musician, right? And you and I share the trombone background. It's really funny.
So
Even
good.
earlier you mentioned Joe Alessi, and I'm just like, only
Oh
two of
yeah,
us know
man.
who that is,
Chilling. So good.
But yeah, my background originally from third grade on was like symphony classical track.
Mhm.
And it was mixed in with a lot of sports and stuff like that. But it started there and then Broadway, so I was a dancing musician. I was in a show called Blast that was kind of born out of drum and bugle corps. And we were in that spectacle space like Stomp, where we were like running around on stage playing instruments and stuff. And I did that for about 7 or 8 years, late high school and into college. And that also, I ended up there because they were offering scholarships at IU. I was a music major at Indiana. I was on track to just go get a job, in a symphony, and then got entered, figured out that I had a gift for dancing and all that stuff, and then got in this show. And then what brought me to production, and well, one little thing I will say, my mother was a really early in the 80s, high level kind of computer person. She worked at Martin Marietta back before they merged with Lockheed and stuff. And so I was exposed to computers very early. And I was around, like I was like literally building computers back in the Trash 80 and the 386, 486. Like I was literally building computers when I was in elementary school with the help of like uncle and people teaching me. So that was weird because it was always there, right? And then but it wasn't what I was doing for a living. And then I got into raving and like the warehouse scene and like indie Chicago, London, all that. I lived in London in '99. And so I got really into drum and bass and electronic music. I got really into Bjork and like all the kind of artists spray out from Bjork. Cause I would just open up the CD jackets like who's playing this, and go find those people and look up what they're doing. And they're generally these amazing artists. But so the electronic music thing was actually what started to pull me more deeply into computers, honestly, from just kind of like hacking and stuff like that when you're a kid. And then honestly, when I was doing the performance thing for a while, but I got to a point where the show that I was in was corny to me. And it's not that that show was bad, but it was very Disney, like it was for kids and all that kind of thing. And I just started wanting to make my own show and be able to hire all my friends and all that kind of stuff. And I got into Max MSP first, actually, because I was asking people around me at music school. I said, how do I translate like a microphone signal into lighting, and how do I take pressure and make that sound? And I was really just into the synesthesia thing because I was eating tons of acid and fucking ecstasy and mushrooms and everything. And so like the whole synesthesia thing became like a big artistic push, because that's literally just what it does to your brain. And so I got into Max and Jitter. I also, it's funny, I was a stagehand. It's really good money to be a stagehand. And when I was on Broadway as a performer, the guy putting the mic on my horn was making twice as much as I was. And I was like pouring sweat, had a dislocated.
The life of a trombone player. Let me tell you, folks, you think it's hard in these streets? Go try being a classical trombone player.
Or a dancer.
God.
Like
or
trying to make a
dancer,
living as a dancer. Like it's like you're getting like $200, like per gig. Like it's rough.
Yeah.
So I started being a stagehand a little bit, and I also wanted to, I told them I wanted to learn how to build my own shows and all that kind of thing. But anyway, so what transitioned into media server and touch designer, funny enough, was honestly, I'm not ashamed to say, with money. Like I was mixing audio. I was actually mixing front of house sound for a country musical in New York. This is 05, 06 Amazing. Or something. And they were like, hey, we're going to have projection on this next show. And they brought in a hypnotizer. And when they brought it in, they were like, this machine is like $100,000 and it's like crazy and blah, blah, blah. And it was like a StarTech rack mount server, and I recognized it as like just a normal computer box. I open it up, look inside it, and I was like, this is a gaming PC. Like, how is this $100,000 or something? And I started Venom, my first media server company, in 07, like right after that, because I realized, and actually Venom was all based around Jitter. All of that was Jitter. And actually Control Freak was doing the same thing at the time. And Control Freak, they were doing Mariah Carey and early Beyonce and all this kind of stuff. And I did Beastie Boys with them when they came to town. And like, no lie, they sat me down in front of the joysticks for the Robos, and I looked up at the screen. I was like, oh, this is Max. And they were like, wait. And they were surprised. They were like, oh, you know what Max MSP is? And then I started talking to them, and we realized we had been on the forum talking to each other about DMX.
Oh my God, that's so much fun.
And so, and then I realized like, oh, there's people doing what I'm doing, where they're like making their own servers and they're doing giant tours. And that kind of inspired me, like, oh, I can do this, And so Venom, that first company, was my first kind of big disruption, where I started, Pandora, Hippo, actually Discogs wasn't out yet. Back then it was still just
D3,
UVA,
right?
D3, UVA D3. Yeah. And I was working directly with like, Axe or what, I can't remember the guy's name, but that originally created it at UVA, because we use it on Fela, and we use it on like Fela off Broadway before it even went big, and that was a long time ago now. But yeah, that early media server world, Venom, I wanted to be in that world. I couldn't afford those boxes. And I also found that if I just put my head down at night, I could build those tools. And I was getting a lot of help. Also, one from the Max community, and also from the guys at 1024. I got to give a shout out, because I got into Quartz Composer around the same time. And before Mad Mapper existed, the guys at 1024 they were really generous, and they gave me like mesh warping tools
Oh,
before
no way.
anybody had that shit. Like, and it was inside a Quartz Composer, and I was able to take it into VDMX, take it into other stuff, and and I was doing a lot of like standalones. I would have opera designers that wanted like Mac Minis in the air, just so they could use a projector as a more complex light and stuff like that, shimmers and stuff. So I was doing also a lot of like, I needed to hand someone an executable and say, go buy any Mac
Yeah.
in this
Just
run.
double click.
And so Maximus P and Quartz Composer were both great for that, actually. And then I guess this is a really nice, easy transition to Touch Designer. Fashion Week in like 2012-ish, 11, 12, something like that. We were using a lot of Max and Jitter, and then I tried Touch Designer for this one particular thing, and it was the heaviest processing load, the hardest thing I had tried to do to that point. A big ticker. We had a bunch of screens wrapped around Mercedes Fashion Up at Lincoln Center in the main lobby, and then in all the other venues we had different shows going on for January. There's 5 or 6 fashion shows always going on at one time, and we had this big ticker thing that was, it would be an ad and then a live show and then an ad and then a live show, and it was just a ribbon that constantly rotated. And whenever we would want to go live, just hit a button and it would roll into whatever's live in a certain theater. Now, when I first set that up with Touch Designer and I put up some big text and I had stuff like really slowly scrolling, I couldn't find any judder, any frame judder at all.
I think this is something that people don't remember from 2011. What you're describing was difficult in 2011.
It was hard. Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, like your first tutorial is doing that. In 2011, that was very hard. That was very difficult.
Yeah, just to get the bandwidth, to get the read bandwidth and then get the SDI coming through the machine, everything. The machine's just like, they could barely do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was blown away how smooth Touch Designer was at the time. And then literally from that point, I was like, oh, this is now my shit. Like, and it's been the main kind of spine of the stuff I do. Even I use a ton of other softwares, but it's been the main backbone since then. But that, I feel like that's a good like music, dance software for the sake of creation. And then honestly, the rest of it,
servers, and then kind of like
I just kind of follow the money / what I like. And I mean, these days it's a lot of lighting, lasers and stuff like that's not even video based, but it was still all just kind of like following my interest, and
I think from all I know of the folks that are in our industry, you found like a really good balance of follow the money and my interest. Because I think a lot of people feel that it's a little bit more binary of like, either I'm following the money and I gotta, I always joke about like, I bought a house by making movie players. And then other people are like, well, I'm going to be completely artistic and make no money. But, there is a middle ground in there where you're working on things that have good budgets, and, it does take time to work up to that level of experience and kind of reputation in the industry to get those gigs, but they do exist. And then you've done a really good job of like finding those or creating those for yourself. And I think that kind of leads into, one of our next topics, which was this idea. And I think we're going to come at this from a different angles. And for folks watching, like, compared to a little bit of our like more linear progressing bullet point interviews from before, what I always love talking about, Brandon, is we're bouncing off, we're going here, we're going there, we're coming back here, we're coming back here. So don't be afraid to just like go back and rewatch this, especially if we start going through some topics real quick. But this idea of the process of pitching concepts to high-end clients, I think is something that you do really well. And we were even talking a little bit about this funny kind of story before the stream started, which was, and hey folks in the chat, we're real here. When I'm walking around and talking to my friends, I have a potty mouth. It's like a thing. But I always tell everybody, like there's a time and place for saying things and a time and place for not saying things. And I have a very good filter, as I always claim. That's one of the reasons why my day rate is so high, is my filter is amazing. And I can really quickly transition from how I speak to friends and how I speak in front of audience or clients or things like this. But you also had a really interesting story about how that relates to that process of working with different clients, pitching to different clients. And I'd love if you kind of like bring some of that up, especially like, and you can pick whichever angle you want to kind of get into it from.
Yeah, it does certainly relate to how you make money and do what you want. And I actually see it very much as like a personality thing. There's certainly, I don't like them to be separate, but there's it's easy to see in our industry where some people are really strong at the technology and some people are really strong at creative. Also, just sales, the way it's termed in the business world, is a pretty specific thing, to try to get people to sign a check, or to sign that service agreement. But for me, I'm pretty intuitive about all that stuff, as it kind of comes out of my personality. But like the thing that we were chatting about before that I think is really relevant is it really depends on your role. And like when I go in to talk to a client that's asked to speak to me, or somehow they got my name or something, and I do almost like a therapy analysis or something on these people, of like what it is, why they called me, and because some people got my number because someone did an $8 million show with me and everything went well and nobody went over budget, and blah blah blah. Like there's this like safety net of execution that some people will call me for. And then there's I ride a motorcycle at 180 miles an hour. Like there's that thing that some people also call me for, like Ferrari as a client, Cadillac. I have this project I'm working on right now with Cadillac where they specifically called me because I'm the car guy and that I've done all these car reveals and that I'm really into motorsports and that I love it. And they corporate, well, I'd say, Viacom is a really good example too. I've done a lot of stuff with the big Verizon, Viacom type Amex, where they're paying you to be cool. Like they're like, we don't know what's cool. Like you're spending all your time partying, going to stuff, looking at art. Tell us what's relevant. Like tell us what's going on right now. And yeah, those and I'm finding as like life goes on, I mean, some people hit it young, but for me, I wasn't being called as an artist as much until say the last 10 years or something, right? And a lot of that also is from passion projects and stuff. It's funny, we're talking about chasing the money too. I'd say one of the most important things to do is like, you go do the Verizon job, you make a bunch of money, make sure that part of that you go and then go make a music video with an artist you love where you're making nothing on, but you're gonna make the coolest looking, prettiest looking thing you can make. And like the laser video I did with Mela, for example, completely random. Like she just came to my house one day, listened to the song that I had made. She's like, I love this tune. I called up my homie that has a red. I took a laser over into House of Yes late one night, asked my friends, can I use the space? Didn't pay for anything. Everybody was there, volunteer. That one video was why I did like 7 films for Bottega Veneta. It's why I did that NARS commercial. It's why all this stuff. And it was just because we were just like, hey, we want to kind of see this. We haven't seen anybody do this. And like you make a thing. So I would say that's also a really big part of trying to do both is make sure you're not only doing just what you're getting paid for.
Yeah. And I put your website link in the chat for everybody. So as we're talking about some of these gigs and projects that they can go there and at least see some visual references to them, because there's a lot of really amazing work that you've been a part of. And I think that's an interesting one. I would definitely self-report myself as a little hard leaning on doing the projects with the money. Not as much passion projects, probably something I got to work on. I mean, you could consider education type of stuff, a passion project back when I was doing more projects, but neither here nor there. But I think there's an interesting kind of parallel between, I think you brought it up really interestingly, like there's some folks who are really good with technology and might be like a bit more on the shy side and have difficulties doing pitches, presentation, client stuff. Some people are on the other side where they're really good at doing pitches, presentations, talking to folks, networking. They might not be as strong on the technical side. And I think, me and you are probably a little bit similar in that regard, where I think we're a little bit in the middle. Like even I don't consider myself, there's, folks that I really respect, Norman, Vincent, Jose, Matthew, like these folks who, if we both sat down and were to write Python or GLSL, theirs is going to be better than mine. Yeah. And that's why I get them to teach HQ courses and I don't do those ones, like that's it. And there's also going to be people who are more suave than myself and definitely rock the client situation like way better. But as someone who I think is kind of like me in the middle, is there some advice you might give to either side of those folks?
Yeah, totally. I would say the thing that I've learned, what a client is buying is excitement. And so like when I go into something, I mean, I actually, I don't go in trying to sell something that I'm not stoked on. And
Oh, interesting.
and because it just doesn't, like, honestly, you're setting yourself up for failure. Like if, and I've even, it's not really a big deal to say this, but I had a project with Verizon years ago where I begged them not to do it. And I literally said to them, I was like, guys, this is not going to be cool. Like this experience is not going to be what you think it is. They still spent the money. And then we were in the summer, we were just like sitting there with it finished. And I had the head of Verizon marketing being like, so Brandon, what do you think? How can we kind of spruce this up and make this better? And I was like, you don't get to ask me that. Like literally, I told you not to do that. You know, like there's no way. But anyway, so the biggest piece of advice I say is like, just get excited. Like the thing that, you know, it's infectious, right? Like when I go into the room to describe like what I want to do for something, a car review or a music video or whatever, I'm usually, I'm really excited about it. And I'm like, oh, like if we do this and this, like, you know, I've seen this over here and like, but this would just be so beautiful. And especially if I'm excited about the music artist, it's pretty easy for me. I get really excited about music artists, but even like conceptually, like what I'm selling for this reveal right now, I'm bringing up things I saw at MUTEC. I'm bringing up what other car manufacturers have done at their last couple of big reveals, what happened at Pebble Beach this year, all this kind of thing. And it's not that I'm fabricating it. It's like I'm actually legitimately interested in these things and I get excited about them. But I think clients, that's the biggest thing they're buying is one, a sense of security, and also just a sense of excitement, because that's all they're responsible for doing, right? They're trying to excite clients and stuff like that.
I think it's excitement is a weird one. There's a lot of feelings I think you could pretend through. I feel like excitement, I have found personally, is not one of them. If I'm not excited about something, like it is hard to put a grin on my face in front of a client, you know, like I'll do decent, but it's like, you could tell somebody who's known me standing beside me is like, oh, like we don't want to do this. Like, this is not exciting for us.
Yeah, I think some people are good at faking it, but like I'm not either. I actually have a really hard time lying. Like I hate even messing with it. So I'm very honest. But I also I'm someone who, I had fake fangs and spikes in my face when I was on Broadway. I wear spike collars to executive meetings, you know. So I get away with saying whatever the fuck I want, like most of the time, as long as I'm not just insulting someone.
Yeah.
But I have definitely been like, no, that's corny, you know, like, like to an executive. And they honestly, they like that, you know. And I'll tell you for a fact, like Kanye and a lot of people like that, like they don't want you walking on their shows. Like they want to hear, just don't call them stupid or anything. They want to hear.
And I think this kind of ties in a little bit interestingly. Like we had another topic here, which was talking about different industries. And I think we have like a really interesting background coming from music, being really tied into that, bringing that into our scene, into this kind of immersive media. And we were even talking before the show started, about history and art history. And you actually even mentioned now, like one of the reasons why you get certain projects when it comes to cars, bikes, and companies like in those adjacent areas is, you know, about cars and bikes and all those kind of interesting things. So I'd love to know kind of your opinion. Actually, you know what, before we even go to like the opinion and stuff, like what was that experience like for you getting some of those projects in those fields that you have like some interest in, like when it comes to cars and bikes, and how did you find your knowledge about them and the history of them kind of really directly helped you either progress in those, get them, or, you know, mingle in those kind of spheres? Because I think people have this conception that like none of that stuff matters. Like, oh, you know, all about like, and because I think that it's like, if I had to give like the one, and you know, I've been in therapy for a while now, so I like to mingle in these discussions, but there's like a trauma experience that people have coming into our industry where they kind of want to forget their previous life and move into the industry, and like they want to cut and tie what they used to do before, instead of embracing like, oh, I have all this wealth of knowledge, I have all these areas of interest, how do I tie these two together? I'm guilty of it myself. Like when I got in this industry, I was like, I ain't touching no trombones no more. Classical music is, you know, I ride or die Glenn Gould, carry on, and that's like it. But I think you're a really good example of like melding all these different passions together. creates a more interesting and kind of like capable end result, I think.
Well, I want to at least say I'm very lucky. Like I'm very lucky, and a couple of reasons for that. Thinking about this progression, so historical context is a huge thing, and it's also something, a bit of advice I would give to anyone young, because it's the hardest thing. Like you only have so many years in the can, right? And you need to like watch as much of whatever's in your field. Like if you're a generative video artist, right? Like make sure you've watched everything from like the 50s, 60s, 70s, like all that stuff where it was all analog, broken CRTs and all that stuff, just so you have a sense, because I did it. Like, so when well, I feel like I learned at IU in this very beautiful way. Indiana was one of the greatest music schools fucking
ever. Amazing. Yeah.
Unbelievable. And their teaching method really influenced me, because you have these 4 years that are all chronological. So music history, ear training, music theory are all on the same chronological track for 4 years. And you end up studying what type of art changes and political changes were going on in the world that caused like the music to do certain things. And so it's like, it was part of my early education that even what I was studying in music, it's like, how is it affected by the whole rest of the world and the psyche of like the collective human experience? And so then when I came to New York, I had this funny meeting. I came to New York and I was like, I want to make all these shows and I have all these great ideas and I think I'm original. And then I sat down with this guy. I won't say his name just for whatever, but he was like, he connected me with the technical people behind Laurie Anderson and like this deep, like OG New York, like visual and audio synesthesia kind of scene. And I sat down with this guy and he's like her main, like figure everything out type of dude. And he was like, okay. He goes, I love everything that you're saying to me, because I'm going to give you a list right now of all the shit you need to go watch. He's like, because you're describing exactly what this person did 25 years ago.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And so I was like, amazing, so he gave me all this stuff, and literally I hadn't even heard of all this stuff. And I went and I watched all this like really cool old visual art and all this stuff. And that also, like, when I say I'm lucky, it's because I got told that early, and I started that process at IU and stuff. And so for me, it's always been a part actually of what I think. When I think about why am I going to do something, there is part of me that's, just thinking about that context. Now, I don't think it's healthy actually to be constantly trying to place yourself in like the canon of your art form. I think that's actually quite toxic. And Bjork is one of those people who, she says whenever she goes in to make an album, she doesn't listen to anything like beforehand, because she doesn't want like a bunch of current pop stuff like in her head when she's going to make something. There's both those kind of approaches, and like I think historical context is really important. But I just wanted to say, like, it's not all about that for sure. Like, you don't want to only focus on that. It's just something you want to have in there, just as a variable. Now the Cadillac thing did just happen. I mentioned it the other day. It was because I've done all these Ferrari reveals and Acura, and I did a bunch of Bentley reveals. I'm doing at Pebble Beach, a bunch of stuff, and they told me literally, they were like, you can tell us what year which car got revealed with what type of effect. They're like, that's a huge part of like why you're here, is so that we know we're current, and so I talked through McLaren, Lamborghini, Jaguar, like all the stuff people have been doing. And I mean, there was a year, actually the McLaren P1 year was also the Bentley Continental GT year, and John McGuire was still in the McLaren, and 3 doors down Bentley.
That's so funny.
And we are both using projection.
And this is like a passion thing of yours. Like, those things, not because you were like, I have to do industry research. Like, you enjoy cars, bikes. So you were just been like watching these things, learning, seeing what people are doing. And then as you were kind of merging that with your knowledge of like the immersive media field, you're like, oh, I know like what everyone's doing. So to your point, like, I know what's going to be new, unique, cool, interesting.
Yeah, there's some fun stuff that we're working into this thing I can't really talk about. That is, it's the laser projection mixture vibe.
That should be cool. And that's coming out soonish.
The event is in October. The car has not been revealed yet. Actually, they showed the car privately at Pebble Beach this year. The car's not out yet. Yeah.
So people can follow you on socials. They can follow your website. We put the website. I'll put it again in the chat. And then around October-ish, they'll probably start seeing some interesting stuff about that.
Yeah.
Now we do have some fun little notes and questions in the chat that we can
cool.
dive into
I've
before
been
switching
checking the
up a
chat
couple questions.
here and there.
So let's see what we got here. Hey, folks in the chat, we are watching and listening. I'm just not constantly interrupting to say the questions. So definitely throw questions in the chat because I'm gonna come bring them up.
When I refreshed my page and I lost them, so you got to.
Do you need me to send you a new link? Do you got it?
No, I have the link. I'm just saying whenever you refresh, you lose the chat.
Oh yeah, that's annoying. Okay, so there was a question. Any chance we can see a video from the Tiffany show? Do you have one on your website?
Well, that terrible LiveX video is up there. There is a video.
Yeah. Okay. If you go to Brandon's website, or do you have it on social somewhere?
Not socials. Let me check if it's on my website. I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it's a link right to the LiveX.
Yeah, it exists. If you need to see it, also we'll put our email, support at Interactive Immersive. You hit me up after. We'll hook it up. Okay, so then we had another cool question here. Actually, somebody was asking if we're going to talk about the boys demo and the tech behind it, which I think will be a lot of fun. We can kind of, where are we at now? 2:35. So when we get to like 3, we'll kind of shift over a little bit to like technical stuff, which will be fun to talk about. And I think we can talk about Touch Designer and the boys and all that kind of stuff in there. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one.
Tiffany videos on there.
Okay, dope. Yeah, okay, yeah. So there's perfect. Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, if you click through that video's there. It's a super corporate. I hate that video.
But there's a lot of.
But you get to see all the projectors and the waterfalls and all the stuff.
Yeah. Vince is asking in the chat, when you meet a stranger at a party, what do you tell them you do? Blending so many domains makes my elevator pitch a bit frenetic. And I can go first if you want to have a couple seconds to think about it, or if you want to like pop it off.
Go ahead. Actually, I'll simmer on it for a second.
Okay. What would I say? So I meet a stranger at a party. What do I do? I run an online school that tries to teach. This is going to sound like a plug. I know, because I'm just going to like plug the HQ right now, but I swear to God, it's not like planned. Whatever. But I run a school online. We try and teach and empower all the young artists and developers, help them get their dream careers in this creative space. We work with all kinds of really top high-end professionals to make courses for them. And I've been doing this in the industry for more than 10 years now. I was in the trenches before, now I'm teaching. It's a lot of fun. Isn't it funny? Now that I say it a lot, my pitch has gotten so much more casual and chill. I feel like my pitch before used to be like real, like jump kick out of the bushes type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's concise too. Like you saying, like,
keep it short, keep it simple.
I now educate. Yeah. No, that's good. My shortest one that I usually tell
yours is going to be good. I know. Give me a good. It's going to be a good one.
Well, honestly, production design, or sometimes I just say people call me to make shit cooler.
I knew that was going to be one of the. It was going to be like, I do cool shit. Like, let me know.
I mean, because it's like I'll get calls where I'm not doing anything. Like they're just like, hey, can you just look at this and like figure out like what's wrong with it? You just look at it. But
I think that matches
design,
your personality too. Like and like you were saying, like a lot of people that are calling you from your experience of like, what's kind of cool thing that we could do.
Yeah, and I'm usually pretty I'm intuitive about like if I watch a performance, because I mean I even get these calls from Coachella, artist who shall not be named. Last year we talked about this. Shit the bed on the first weekend in Coachella, and then his management team, everybody called me, and I get the calls sometimes of like, just watch the show. And then I'm like, oh, you need to reorder the songs. He's out of shape. He needs to fucking get in shape. He can't sing in tune after the 7th tune, like whatever. Like there's some of that stuff because I've just had experience being on stage, 7 years of dancing around on stage and staring at the, and like.
Even without dancing, it's difficult. Dancing, crazy difficult.
Yeah, that's fun time. But yeah, I just, if I need a really concise way to talk about what I do, honestly, production designer is a pretty good catch-all. It just depends because different industries have different definitions of these roles, right? And like, even when I tell people like, oh, sometimes I'm an EP, they're like, well, wait, what? Like if they're in TV, like it doesn't make sense to them and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I mean, you're from I don't know how many people on the chat are familiar with drum and bugle corps, right? But drum
probably
corps,
not many. People should go watch Blast. Like, it's a funny story. Like, I was watching Blast when I was in music school. I had no idea you were in it, and we found out like years later.
Yeah.
I was like, this is cool. This is the next thing in classical music. I was like, this is cool.
Yeah, well, believe me, we believed in it like big time. I mean, when I was in it, we were all in, and I was original cast, so I wrote part of my choreography and stuff.
Which is amazing.
Part was like
That's
tailored
so
to me. But yeah, in that community, I also judged a bit, and I taught a lot of drum corps. And one of the categories that as a judge in the sheet that they get scored on is GE, general effect. And that is also a huge portion of your ensemble score. And it's one of the biggest effect on whether a core, like where a core ends up slotted that night. Now there's 12 judges and there's like 25 different categories and stuff, right? So it's all weighted. But the GE thing, the funny enough, that category, the way it was described in drum corps and stuff like that, is also that's kind of my role. Like it is this like overall effect thing. But the thing is, you don't end up judging GE until you've taught 10 years of drum corps, you know, because it's like you don't really have a good sense of like how to make stuff hit until then. So as I've gotten older, it's actually similar to the music world, right? Like you start playing, then you start teaching just your section. You're teaching trombones. Now then you're teaching low brass, then you're teaching all the brass. Now you're teaching the full core and you're doing ensemble, whatever. Honestly, my progression in the industry has been a bit of that. Like spend time in the chair doing the media server programming, pull lights, pull cable through fucking beer and piss at the Garden.
Oh my God, the messy hands I've had.
Dude, I did the stagehand thing like hardcore, like at Summer Stage and Garden, and I worked for Cirque for years, a bunch of everything else stuff. And I went through the trenches in that sense, so that later when I'm drawing up a truss structure, like I'm thinking, I don't want to fuck these guys. Like what's easy to put together, what's going to go in and out fast, and all that. And I've actually sat there and turned the wrench. So yeah, I find myself in more and more roles that relate to my experience just as I get older, you know, because that's just what people need.
I think a related comment or question here that we could probably both throw some input on. Someone was mentioning, I also come from a classical music conservatory background, but really interested in transitioning into the realm of multimedia performances with visual projection, lighting, and sensors. What would you what would you suggest is the best way to get started? And are there any opportunities to get more hands-on experience like internships and etc.?
Well, something I feel like I thought about earlier and we didn't quite touch on, but I did want to mention
hit it.
Is the fashion and the dance communities were also something where all in like the early mid 2000s teens, kind of that zone where VDMX, touch, disc guys, all these things were like exploding. The dance, like the interactive dance world and the fashion film world were honestly the two hotbeds. Like that's where all the high level art and software stuff and like all the cool shit was really going on. And like Chunky Move obviously was like when that first happened, like the first real blob tracking and everything that worked great. And that was, you know, on that tip of internship and stuff, like I worked with them on Mortal Engine. I reached out to Frieder Weiss, like after Glow happened and I saw that thing, I was like, how the fuck? And I figured out who did it. He's this teacher, Frieder Weiss in Denmark. And he was helping this Australian dance company, whatever. But I literally just started emailing him. He sent me his software icon at the time, which was like Windows 3.11 or something. And like, you know, it had all these like draw a line across the camera frame and you could trigger MIDI and like, you know,
no way,
really,
that's sick.
Really fun stuff, dude. It's really early on.
Yeah.
And you know, me just asking like, hey, can I get in there and help? You know, like, can I come? And then also, I didn't even know it, but on that show, I met Robin Fox, one of the greatest like laser and oscilloscope artists ever to live, in my opinion. And Robin changed my life, like teaching me what he knew about audio-driven lasers. And he and I talked a lot about one-to-one sound to light synesthesia type stuff. And but internships, I mean, hell, you're better at that, like as far as who's got openings and like where to go work. But transitioning, I mean, I would say the reason I brought up the dance thing is like, for me, the transition from classical to what we do now, interactive dance and interactive music was the gateway to learn all the software stuff, you know, was because I wanted to figure out I basically wanted to figure out just how to amplify the instincts of an artist. Like I wanted, and I you know, I brought up Raj Mandela, right? Like my homie, his Instagram's Currency Audio. He's doing this thing now with Touch Designer and Ableton. And he's the beauty of what he's doing now is it's all improvised. It's like he's at a point where he's done all this like logic programming inside of Ableton so that he can make full on crazy electronic, like drum and bass, jungle, whatever, like all kinds of different stuff with melodies and key changes and all. And he does it all just from drum pads, all live, all on the fly. And he's generating all his touches on our visuals and connects them all live on the fly. And he and I were just talking the other day. It's like the beauty of that is like I used to spend a lot of time recording in the expression. So that's why I worked for Jasmine.
Yeah.
Like I was so into the lemur, was because it was like I was getting
Oh my
different.
God, we had lemurs. Rip.
I've still got 2 of them. I worked
You
for
still got
Jasmine.
two? I
Did
I
you know I
sold
worked for
mine.
Jasmine?
At some point, I think we've had this discussion about we were some of the few people with lemurs.
Yeah. Yeah, I bought one of the very first ones, and then they hired me as like the US person to make custom interfaces for studios and stuff. And
Oh,
then
that's dope.
and yeah, I mean when the iPhone came out, that was it.
That was, yeah.
You know, but yeah, anyway, the lemur, the thing I loved about it was like the same curves that you would generate if you're just running a fader or a knob. The lemur, you had this physics engine and you had this visual thing you're interacting with, and it caused me to come up with all new curves, like for the whatever I was making, electronics and stuff. And I would do a lot of finding ways of either breath controllers, pressure sensors, whatever, of trying to record a very human, organic input stream to then make other digital stuff with. And I feel like that is my general ultimate goal coming from classical into a performance art thing, is how do I make all this digital shit feel human at the same time as it still has this digital quality? Because like Raj is playing like these OG like Photek snare sounds and just like sick like classic stuff where I recognize the sample, but it's always been put in a grid. And now he's playing it like a mesh pad with all this expression and all this stuff, and it's got a human characteristic, but it's still a digital snare, and it creates this blend that it's like very, very unique. And I would say, but that's the biggest thing I would say for anyone transitioning from classical is don't give up all that expression that you've practiced.
No.
And all that, because now you know how to feel the shit, you know how to make rubato, right? Like you know how to just push and pull your tempo in a way that's just simply emotional, and you don't have to think about what's landing and syncing up and all those kind of things. So I would say go towards things that take those instincts in you and then amplify them, but don't try not to let the computer make you square. You know what I mean? Like box you in,
which is very easy to do. I mean, all the buttons try and do that. So be careful not to do that. I would say, I guess my quick 2 cents on that, which I think you touched on really early in that, is that there's and I think this goes cross industry, cross genre, is that people higher up in the ladder remember and respect and appreciate the eagerness of the next generation coming under them. And I think that's something that we often take for granted when, and it's probably not talked about that. It's not like the coolest topic to talk about, my respect and appreciation for the eagerness of the next generation is not like, that exactly a conversation topic you just be dropping everywhere. But it's a feeling I think that does exist in a lot of folks that do kind of get to that higher end or later stage of their career. But the problem I always tell folks, and this is like a real common like HQ Pro discussion, is it's surprisingly, I think people don't take into consideration, hiring people takes effort and time. So a lot of time there's always the need for people to have assistants, interns, even just like junior people helping them. They just don't have the time to make job postings and go through interview processes and all this stuff. And just like you were saying in your story of like, and I sent him an email and then I said, hey, like, what's up? Oh my God, like careers have been made on emails that say, hey, what's up? I'm this young person from this place. I'm trying to do this. And then you show a little bit of appreciation too, because like respect and appreciation for the people before you goes a long way. You say, I really enjoyed the things you were doing, inspired me. And then, whatever,
Actually,
drop a couple questions. You have an opportunity, like, just let me know. It
this
goes
is
so far.
a good little tidbit too of advice. I talk to Anna about this a lot because she gets this a lot online on Instagram and stuff with DMs. Like I don't mind at all random people hitting me up on Instagram. I'm not one of these people that's like pushes that away, even though I do hide social media wise. I'm a very good hider. But I will say when you approach someone online, make sure right out of the gate you like introduce yourself and stuff, because I have had messages come from people and it doesn't offend me, but I know with Anna and other friends, they're kind of like, what the fuck? Because they get so many.
Yeah.
For people that get a lot, if you just come out of the gate and like, hey, you got anything coming up, whatever, and you don't just take that extra couple of sentences to be like, hi, my name is blah, 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 and I've watched your stuff here or like whatever. That little quick intro also really does go a long way. But yeah, I would say don't be shy. And that's probably one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people that are good at what we do. By default, to get good at this stuff, you tend to have to sit in front of a screen, which I fucking hate, but like you
Yeah,
end
tell
up
me.
in these rooms in front of the screen and stuff, and then people are kind of like shy or whatever. But so it's pretty common, I feel like, for people to just not like I said, just send an email or just send an Instagram DM or something, like, because yeah, you'd be surprised how far that'll get you. And I like
100%.
I'm exactly in the space that you're talking about. Like I fucking need help. Like a lot of times
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God, need help all the time.
but it's it's tricky because that person, sometimes the help, you end up, the mentor thing ends up adding workload.
Yeah.
As opposed to, and it's not that that's bad. It's just, it's timing and circumstance. And then, like I said, the part about like job postings and all that stuff, I mean, yeah, oh my God, like the thought of even trying to do that right now,
Oh my God,
they happen. So yeah, just reach out to people. The people that you like what they're doing, just hit them up. That's probably the best
hit them
advice
up.
anyone could give you.
Be polite, be respectful, be appreciative. Show deference. Like all that kind of stuff goes a real long way.
Also, hit up the artists you like. Like if this person, whoever asked this, is in music and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Literally for me, I pick up, Miley, Doja Cat, Megan Thee Stallion, Rosalia, like I'm looking for who is their manager, who am I, like, how do I make something for this music that I'm already listening to,
Yeah.
and I'd rather just make a video for it or something, so don't be bashful about that shit either, man. I go to do a music video and I've got a 22-year-old creative director talking to me, telling me what to do, and I'm like, okay, cool, like, sweet, like, so it's not even an age thing. It's with the artist, it really is just, do they like your style? And if they do, you'll find yourself running $1 million shoot at fucking 22.
And once you get in a little bit, the crowbar is the hard part to put in the door. Wedging it open real easy. Once it like gives a little bit of jig, you're
I mean, Emil Nava is like the perfect example of that. Like, just look at Emil Nava's career,
So hopefully that helps. Now, we got a question in the chat. Wait, is that background real? I think they're talking about your background, Brandon.
Yeah, no,
Yes,
I'm in the
real.
backyard. Yeah, I'm just at my friend's place in New York.
Yeah, very real. Okay, and then we got another question. Could you talk about designing projections for inside geodesic domes and tents? We'll maybe talk about that in the technical section, so hang in with us. We'll probably shift over to technical stuff in maybe like 15, 20 minutes. We got a question here from Butch. What's more important in the content creation for brand advertisement? Skill in software or money for impressive hardware? That's a tricky question. Ooh. It depends on the client, I feel like.
So wait, the question is, what's more an important tool? Or
okay, yeah. So I think that if I was going to reword the question, it would be, if you were in a situation of you got a gig for doing brand advertisement and you're trying to make something sick, what's more important, skill in your software or money for impressive hardware?
Oh, skill in your software. Because you can just cloud everything.
You can cloud everything, but there is something to be said about impressive hardware. Does go a long way sometimes.
I mean, who are you talking to? I mean, so the whole thing,
like
of
a cool
LED
bar that spins around real fast.
That's actually,
you start to 100%, right? Like, so that's why in my mind it's like it's a little bit of both, right? Like, having skill in software, I think what it does is artificially reduces the amount of money it takes to make impressive hardware look impressive, because you could do more with less stuff.
But wait, what are you talking about? So when you say hardware and you talk about that, I'm thinking you're talking about sculpture or like installation. I thought they meant, do I need a fast computer or do I just need?
Oh, maybe. Butch, let us know if you mean fast computer. My guess was that it's not so much computer, but like a cool LED display, or I got this 3D, one of those new 3D holographic displays, like, or verse. And of course, I think if you have all the money for that and you don't have any skill in the software, I think it's not going to be impressive, because even those things still take like creativity, skills to wrangle and really get the most out of. But I guess this is like
setting?
A or B extreme.
Well, then I would say hardware, because when it comes to, I think, where you frame what you do, like literally the lighting environment you put it in, how people are viewing it or passing by it and all those things, I think is actually more critical than even what you do. And actually, our time with Kanye, John McGuire, motherfucking king of this shit. It's like you get a last minute, dude. It's like, hey, we got 3 days. We got to be on VMAs. What are we doing? I want one light. Like, wait, you want what? No, I want one light. You know, and the thing is, it's like, it just becomes super simple. It becomes super iconic.
Yeah.
Nobody's having headaches like Kate, right? So anyway, my like, I do think the setting, if that is the question, the setting is more impressive to me. I think that might just be me though, you know, and there was this thing that just happened at MUTEC. I want to look up his name, Kisslinger or whatever, but there was this thing that was like projectors and speakers that were like spinning super fast, and it was inside of a dome.
That's sick.
Everything, the sound, everything was whipping around in there, and it was very physical, dangerous, like you couldn't get near it kind of thing. I love that.
I love that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I mean, I think you can get some prismy hologrammy boxes or whatever, like what's his Mimo was making. So and there's things
But
like
I
that
think,
where very simple stuff can go.
I think to your point though, it's Isabel saying that was Patrick Leshner's show.
The circling thing, I was literally about to try to
Rotor, super dope.
Rotor, that's it.
I think there's a little bit, so that's like, it's fun to answer that question, but I think in reality it's like both is the answer.
Yeah.
In reality, you can't be extreme of one or the other. Either one can help compensate for the other. You kind of need both though.
I mean, to be honest,
so balancing.
I would say to that, that person, I just want to give a name. That person, go check out James Clar. You know James?
I think I know James.
CLAR, James Clar. I just like to bring up James because James has this beautiful gift for understanding how to make things that aren't even computer based. So James is a really brilliant computer guy. Like, but he makes installations that are like a fish tank with a camera, and it's like tilting, and then there's a projector on the wall, and it's all physical. Like everything you end up seeing, you're just like, what? And it's all very physical. But James also has a really good knack for artistic, like irony or artistic metaphor. And so he's someone who would maybe contest the idea that you need any software to make
interesting
interactive
something
art,
compelling,
to make things compelling. So I would say go check out James. You know, he's a good example. And he's also just a great lighting artist. He does amazing like LED sculptural art stuff. It's so good.
We got a comment in the chat. After watching this live, I will definitely drop Amazon job offer and follow my passion to create immersive installations. I love it. I also have a deep fear in my heart now, you know, like
of someone not making money.
Yeah, it's a little column A, a little column B, but like, hey, listen, like you do what you got to do, follow your heart, you know, that kind of thing. Just make sure you have like a little bit of runway and, you know.
Yeah, I would say, well, I mean, you're talking to somebody who started a company.
I mean,
risk. Like
I was sleeping on concrete floors for 4 years in the office, so you know, I'm not like the right person to. I grind it. I grind out.
I'm pretty stubborn too. I've only had a desk job for 11 months of my entire life, and
I've never had a real job in my life. It's pretty funny.
But just be aware, like it's not always.
It gets hard, so you know.
It can get sketchy. Just as long as you have friends.
No, sir. Yeah, friends are good.
Family.
Making friends is a good way to get work too. Like there's a real good situation there. Okay. Oh, and actually, we got a lot of stuff in the chat going on here, but I do want to transition to talking some technical stuff, and then if we have some time, we can come back to some of these questions that are a little bit less technical. But before we do that, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the HQ Pro's got a promotion going on right now. If you're interested in some of the topics we're talking about, you're interested in diving into Touch Designer, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you can get your first month for 50% off only until Sunday, September 13, I believe is the date. I'm going to put that link in the chat. By all means, take a look. There's lots of info on the website, so I'm not going to spit too much fire here. I'll just tell you, we got over 150 hours of pro courses taught by some of the best teachers in the business. We got a private Facebook group where myself, Matthew Reagan, our other amazing teachers are in there answering questions with you daily, helping you all progress on your journey. We got little mini not live stream, they're like the live events that happen every 2 weeks with our coaches talking about interesting topics. Actually, we had one that was the other day just about AI, ML art, how it works, secret tips on how to use it, how to stand out in that crowd. A lot of really cool stuff. I put the link in the description. That's all you need to know. But 50% off until Sunday, that's the important part. Makes it much more affordable to hop in for a month. So with that said, I want to transition a little bit to technical stuff because we've been talking. I mean, me and you, bro, like we started this stream 40 minutes early, and we were just chit chatting the whole time, and we could talk all day about everything. But
I'm definitely like a fireside story type of person.
I know, and I love it. I love it. I eat it up, bro. I eat it up. But I think it sometimes hides how much technical knowledge you have, and that's why I want to purposefully shift into a little bit of a technical gear, because you are a production monster. Like there's like so, and you know, okay. So here I'm gonna put like a little like spectrum or line chart or something, right? I feel like there's people in our industry who just know like a touch designer or a computer thing. And actually, you know what? I'm gonna make the spectrum. I'm gonna make the spectrum longer, full screen.
Unreal
okay.
and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, and they only know their app, right? Totally. And there's nothing wrong with being anywhere on the spectrum. I'm just saying, but I just want to paint the picture of where I see Brandon in this spectrum, right? It's like, okay, so somebody who just pops off in their software, touch designer, Unreal, Notch, whatever, content creating god, awesome. I think I'm a little bit more in the middle because I know like how a network infrastructure works, how to do some stuff outside of those softwares, you know, and I'm speaking purely technical, I should say, like ignoring all the business and fun sales stuff, but like just not technical. Like I know how computers generally work. I know how machine learning works, like fundamentally, not just like how to use some of the apps. So I have what I would consider a decent computer knowledge. I know some about projectors. I know something about running lines. But you're like here, bro. You're like, because I could talk to you about SDI lines. I could talk to you about truss structure.
But I got 11 years on you.
I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, I think there's like this, there's such a wide gamut. And now, obviously, you're the first to say, even publicly, like, oh, I'm not the best touchdown artist in the world. Like, it's just different places to be on a wide spectrum of talent. But I think there's something really interesting about how many things you know so deeply. Like, even like you were talking about dance and movement, choreography. You know, we both went to music school. You know how to, for people that don't believe me, I've literally seen Brandon like 100 feet in the air hanging with like a harness. Like you were, I think on Tiffany, you were walking around with a harness on because you would either come talk to me where the computers are, and then you would just go out on stage and just like, you would just go 100 feet in the air and be like doing something. I'm like, this is crazy. Like this man is 100 feet in the air.
That's why I love that shit.
I know you love it too.
Cirque, I was a climber. I mean, my stagehand days, I got successful there because I was fine at 100 feet, but I also know how to fix a projector. So yeah, but I love that shit.
So here's the question, I think, which is a good way to like start a little bit of discussion about this and going into some of the technical stuff like virtual production, which I think similarly requires a bit of knowledge depth across different things to be successful in like a virtual production type of situation. We'll get to that in a sec. But I always ask this question, like, what's your advice or opinion to folks who are trying to decide, should I be specialized or diverse? Which I think is, you know, the common question of, should I be more of a creative technologist type who knows a lot of stuff and I connect the dots well, but if you ask me to, you know, drop into touchdown and start popping some extensions, like it's not me, or versus somebody else. Honestly, Vincent Jose is probably the first person who comes to mind, who is like a hyper specialist, amazing artist. You could ask Vincent anything about touch design or GLSL shaders. IQ on shader toys probably very similar, like such a deep specialized knowledge in a thing that makes them like hyper effective. You know, what are your opinions for someone trying to decide at the early part of their career which branch to kind of lean towards a little bit?
Damn, that is a great question. Yeah, I think you want to base it a little bit on your personality and like what makes you happy, and how you want to spend your time and all that kind of stuff. Because both of those two things are really needed. The Matthews and the Vincents, you know, are like, you know, there's so many things. I wouldn't know who to call for certain things if it weren't for some of those specific people. But for me, a lot of it was just simply born out of necessity, to be honest. And also what I was interested in, like I had to learn how to do a lot of the deeper software stuff just because I wanted to. And I was and honestly, kind of, you know, YouTube has blown apart the whole idea of education. And I remember when that was kind of new, and it was just like, oh my God, I know, right? Online. Like Matthew had his entire Arizona or wherever it was he was teaching, it was all there. And I was like, my God, like this is like, I'm going to college, you know? So I don't know, like, cause some people do enjoy just diving super deep, into like coding and all that. And if that's part of your identity, I would say that, go there. For me, the production stuff and all that stuff, literally, it's super fun for me. Like, it's really fun for me to like climb around a rock and roll rig for 2 days and go home exhausted and sleep for 12 hours. It's just like that whole thing. Like, I have a certain um, romanticized idea of being in the entertainment industry. And for even a little more background context for people watching, I'm an only child orphan. I've spent my entire life in the entertainment industry since I was a teenager. And I went straight to music school and then off on my life. Had no parents. I have no parents, no grandparents, no kids, no wife, no family, and so I'm very uniquely uh, very romantic about like being a gypsy, being in the entertainment industry, being in the circus and all that kind of stuff. It's always been a passion of mine. And so for me, the idea of like climbing around in the sky for a cirque and all that, that was like a dream come true, it's climbing for cirque. And I get really into engineering. I love dealing with like 10,000 pounds and a crane. Like I was doing Bon Jovi stuff for years, Bon Jovi and Madonna, and like it was all similar kind of scene. And I was working with cranes and like learning all the hand signals to tell the crane guy what to do.
Oh,
and,
interesting.
you have something over your head that, could kill you, but you're using finesse and all that stuff. I love all that like engineering stuff. And so for me, it really is just, I ended up going towards where, so as far as like where you pick, yeah, I still feel like it's like, do what's fun, because
Self-reflection, I feels like a big part of it, I think.
yeah, and just ask yourself as a specialist. Well, I want to add this a little bit too, though, because there was sometimes this year, like I've been looking at jobs at Apple, Nvidia, Citibank, or sorry, Capital One of all places, because they've become this weird kind of tech company. And a lot of these places were advertising both like theater technologists or custom software / marketing. It was like digital marketing type people, and they were good jobs. But I wanted to mention though too that as far as a generalist kind of thing, as far as being specialized in just one software, that gets really tricky these days, even if you're going to be a developer. Because like
That's
Raj,
true, for sure.
he works there, and like he told me about the whole interview process when he switched from Verizon to Cap One, and I was looking at the Capital One environment there, and they run it like a startup. But the funny thing is they don't, like when you're applying there, it's not even about you knowing the programming language that they're going to do. Like they expect everyone has to train. Like you could be a 10-year Java programmer and it's like, you don't know shit about Scala, you don't know shit about AWS, but you could be brilliant. And they know that. And so I'll even say, even in straight up software dev jobs these days, they are not looking for a hyper specialized person. They're looking for someone who can learn anything fast. And so because obviously all these new packages and APIs and shit is constantly coming out. And it's more about your fundamental understanding of like how the chips work and how just it all kind of interacts, and how to, and what used to be called hacking, I feel like now it's like everything we do is just trying to get an API from this company to talk to this one over here. And used to, I remember getting condescended to by the people at Livestream that originally created the project, because they were like, Brandon, you make all these crazy camera switchers and stuff. And I made a bunch of products that ended up being Livestream products later, never got a cent for any of it. But like, the thing is, they would say to me, why don't you just start writing C++? Like, why are you doing everything so hacky? And I was like, well, why would I do that? Like when it's already this huge APIs right here and already this thing's here and it's gonna make them talk, But I feel like now the workflow for so much of what we do is that it's just like grab this thing off Open Frameworks, grab this thing off GitHub, get some variable names right, figure out make stuff talk, So I think you want to be flexible no matter what you're doing. But I think if you're going to end up being someone like Vincent or someone that's hyper specialized in something, I think you kind of know, like it's a personality thing. So yeah,
it's a personality thing for sure.
Yeah.
And I think knowing what you like, I think really helps with that. Because I think some folks think that if I don't get hyper specialized, I'll never make good money. Or if I become a creative technologist, I'll never be like effective. But like both are very viable. There's lots of jobs for both of them. I think I agree with you. I think there's more jobs. And I think there's this like new notion of like a T-shaped skill set, which is becoming popular. I've heard that a couple of times, which is like know, and I think it's exactly what you're talking about, which is like know a little bit of a bunch of stuff, And if you, and having one area of like, I can go pretty deep, it doesn't have to be like deep sea diving deep, but like I can finish projects with this one, seems to be like a good balance of skill set mapping. Is it? Maybe I just made that term up, but I kind of like it.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting, and that's kind of, and I know we said we're going to talk about technical stuff, and we just started talking about not technical stuff. So here's like a real technical situation. We had a question in the chat, which was, could you discuss a bit of tech behind the boys demo? What specifically was Touch Designer used for, and how was the UV wrapping accomplished? And then I'm going to add a little bit to this, which is just talking about virtual production, your experiences with it, because I think this is what a really cool set of your experiences is. You not only came in as somebody who was called, and you can mention the client names if you're able, but not, because I think a lot of folks in our industry come in for the content portion of this pipeline. So they're basically coming into this field of like, everything is set up here. I have no idea what it is. I just know that I have to do some front plate, back plate, camera manipulation, camera tracking, and then get it out to some LED walls. But you, because of exactly what we were talking about before, which is like your really deep knowledge of setting things up, production, start to finish, you've actually set up, designed, and like delivered full production studios from scratch, from the truss to the content. So I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff we can talk about this, and even just kind of, I think you have some really interesting ideas about virtual production, your feelings towards it. So we can start with that specifically, like kind of how was Touch used for that boys set, and then we can talk a little bit about that bigger picture.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So inside the boys, that was episodic. I think there was 8 or 9 episodes or something like that. And workflow there. So that was really early on. That was
like early COVID. I think you started, like COVID
May,
just started
May, June
shutting
of
down.
2020. Yeah.
And you were telling me about it. I remember.
Yeah. And that was the Katy Perry thing happened, right? Like that. You know, I'm happy about what that did, because that got a lot of agencies on this whole XR kick. We had been doing AR stuff in news already. And like I was working with ABC News at the time, and they have a VizRT team that was actually using a mixture of Stipe and Moses in the same studio. It's kind of wild. Yeah. In the same place.
And VizRT, for folks that don't know, is Ventus.
Oh yeah,
I believe. Yeah. So if you could look up Ventus, they've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, they're one of those like only TV people know them, and it's very specific to networks and stuff. But yeah, and it's actually in that same studio is also a Touch Designer there running LED strips and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, you know, so I was familiar with AR and stuff like that. We had been kind of kicking it around in news and sports, but so that though, Sony came to me, and yeah, that was top to bottom, like design the stage and hire all the vendors, hire all the lighting guys, design lighting rig, all that, and run those teams. And but workflow wise, so the actual content you see, the models, that's Notch. Touch Designer, but Notch was putting out a single 4K viewport wrap. And then Touch Designer is what was doing all the UV reprojection workflow, and then getting that unwrapped UV stuff, you know, out to the walls the way they need it to be. This was a really cool project too, because you know, Matt that created Notch, that used to work at PlayStation, right? He's so brilliant, and they were a ton of help. They so my team, Aggressive and Tiger Lab, the Barcelona boys, I like to call them, they're wonderful, like modeling 3D content type people. And we all kind of dove in, and Notch, the team at Notch was like, hey, we'll help you, you know, like, so they literally looked over our project files and everything, make sure everything is efficient. And it's actually pretty cool, because like the first meeting we had with the Tiger Lab stuff, where we were, you know, 80-90% getting there, they were like, looks good. Like, yeah, they were like, everything's like really efficient, and it feels pretty good. Now, the reason I brought up Matt was Matt and I did talk about disguise versus touch versus Notch versus, you know, just all these different ways that you can get that whole UV reprojection workflow going, and ways to do it. And he actually prefers touch. Like he likes it the way I like to do it, and it's the same way as Unreal. Like, I don't like rendering out of Unreal, like in display, or the Stipe render. Now the Stipe render has gotten
I'm not a big fan. It's crazy. It
Yeah.
feels crazy.
One, you can't make adjustments the same way. You
Yeah.
can't get in there and make tiny pixel adjustments or edging or do all the stuff that you can do with touch. And I wanted that workflow for a variety of reasons, because so notch is just the world. And then
And the camera basically.
I'm moving, and I'm moving that camera around. Now, the guest fly-ins, those 5 guest windows, so those were, well, we were passing textures, but out from Touch Designer into Notch for those frames. And then Touch Designer was kind of driving, a lot of variables in Notch, like you would expect. Lighting, I was using, we were doing all kinds of different lighting effects for certain moments, and like laser baby and all that stuff. But the thing about Touch in this scenario is like, I can dig into like, oh, the way we dropped the LED wall, like we lost 1 line of pixels here and there, and like it's just so much faster, I feel like, to clean up the mapping and what you want to see in camera in the room. And like, oh, let me just literally take Stoner and like yank up like a portion of something and like, oh, that looks right now. And on a lot of these short timelines, like even having 2.5 weeks, I mean, that's still not a lot of time to shoot like 8 episodes and do all this and set up and calibrate. And you have a day or 2 at that point, at least, of camera calibration, like back then. So
I put a link in the chat for people that want to kind of visualize and see what we're talking about as we're talking about the set and kind of what it looked like. And somebody in the chat actually mentioned, oh no, I'm starting a huge Unreal End Display project. Don't stress. It's not like it's bad. It's just, and I think a good perspective thing is me and Brandon are talking from the perspective that we've been doing things for like 10 plus years. So we know very fine-tunedly which tools we like versus other ones. End Display is very capable. Like, don't get it wrong that like you can't do this End Display. It's just we've been doing it for so long. We're like, oh, I could take this particular subset of features from this software, this subset of features from this software, and that's going to make my life a little bit easier. For somebody else, it might make it way more complicated. So it's not like a silver bullet by any stretch. So definitely don't be stressed out about learning Unreal End Display. Like, fantastic piece of software.
Oh, I mean, for certain things, and if you're, I mean, I'm a hardware guy. Like, I build and sell computers and stuff too, and I've dealt with sync through the years, and I've been doing this long enough that I hate dealing with multi-box sync.
I the first thing I always tell people is, can we do it in one?
Yeah, it sucks.
It's gonna be easier.
And that's the only one of the things that I've just struggled with Unreal End Display through the years, is like something I can do in one box. Like, I need 6 to do it with that, and it just doesn't. But like you said, it comes from like shoot from the hip fashion and all this kind of stuff, where I have to walk in that morning, make something look amazing on camera, and I need to be able to color grade and shove pixels here and there and grab things, and you just simply can't do it as quickly in Unreal, like all those tools. So that's why I like this particular workflow. Now, one of the other cool tech things I want to bring up about this, this was back before anyone was doing any of this frame interleaving, right? And this is a show cut for edit. It's like live to tape. It's a live conversation, but it's for edit, and it was multicam. And so I actually did run 3 frustrums on this stage, but they were not interleaved. This is actually, I've not told anyone that wasn't on site this. This is kind of a secret. But I used the tally from the switcher to choose.
Oh yeah, I remember you were like, I really want to talk to this tally, and I was like, first of all, my first question was like, what is a tally? I've like never heard of this device. I thought you had like some kind of like button on a board with numbers, so I had to like learn what a tally was.
Oh, okay.
I remember we were reading the manuals together, and I was like,
I had to sign all this stuff for Sony, because they gave me the network protocol for the switcher, and the switcher in the truck is like a $300,000 something switcher. So what I ended up doing, and to be honest, it's what I still prefer to the frame interleave, is letting the tally choose which frustrum gets draw on top priority. But that really is for a live show. Now, if you really, really need to like run 4 cameras and be able to cut anything at any time later, yes, the new Brompton frame interleaving, like as long as you get up to like 240 hertz, it feels okay. But I know, like when I was standing on stage and I'm looking at 2 camera, 3 cam interleaved, I was just like, ugh. Like as a host, I would never want to stand in the middle of all this fucking flashing and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But this show, the thing was, the client, like, it was really kind of interesting because they didn't understand. Like when we first started out, I explained to them, I showed them the Katy Perry, and I was like explaining like, how viewport and perspective works. I was like, it's not like green screen. I was like, we only have one great camera at once. And I was like, I can draw two frustrums, but like they can't crisscross, or you won't have both cameras or get one. And I explained all this early on, and client, they were lovely. I love that client. There's nothing wrong, but they just didn't get it. And then when we went into the first day of shooting, one of the producers was like, "What's up with the other camera?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And we had to have this whole conversation again. And then I literally went home that night and built all this tally stuff, stayed up all night, came back in. I had an Arduino and like cables like spidered out to like a USB. And I was like literally taking GPI switches because we didn't have the network protocol yet. And I had to literally bring in an Arduino and make this tally thing work. And it ended up working out to where we did get all cameras, because we ended up where we just cross shoot. So you had both good cameras on two sides of the stage. But that was technically, being so early and running into a lot of these issues just for the first time, and being like, but yeah, workflow wise, that whole show was just notch and touch. No Unreal, no Disguise, no nothing. And all the assets and the beauty work of making that look like, a dirty, wet basement. The other beautiful part of this too is that's all from scratch. Like that, they sent us photos of the actual basement from the show and all the posters, and Barcelona Boys literally modeled all that. So they made those posters. They made this right from the TV show. So it's not just like drop in Unreal assets. I've worked with a lot of television virtual scenic companies in the last 2 years, and so many of them, it's just buying stuff off the store and kind of tweaking a bit.
Yeah, or hitting up CG Trader,
it's essentially an interior design job now,
Yeah.
But that show I think is really beautiful and special in a certain way, because everything is custom. Like it's not from the store.
And I think this kind of is a really interesting topic to talk about. Like, we've touched a little bit technical, but also technical, like where you see virtual production going, because I think you have a really interesting perspective. Like you were saying, AR was something on your radar that you were in already. Then the virtual production kind of popped off. Now things seem to be opening up again. I think virtual production is here to stay, but in different capacities. I think there's going to be clients who are just going to be like, oh, it's easier for us to do everything in camera live than it is for us to take everything to post later. So I think virtual production is like going to be here for a while. But you also have a little bit of opinion about virtual production, and also where things might kind of reorient themselves towards, like whether it's XR in general or AR. So kind of what are your feelings on virtual production? Like, are you still excited about it? Are you looking to do kind of, I mean, I'm sure if somebody came to you with a cool project, you'd do more of it, but I think XR is more where you're excited about overall. Is that correct?
Well, not XR in the set. I hate set extension. I will say that. I hate extending outside.
I feel like it doesn't really work like people think. People think it's like the coolest. It's like,
it's
I don't know
impossible.
if it does. Yeah.
Like the thing is like if you really do the science of it, it's actually impossible. And the closest you're ever going to get is just acceptable, right? Because it's a literal physical impossibility of light and color balance. It will not work. And that's why I've just stayed away from it. I'd rather just build more LED and just stay inside of it. I hate set extension. The thing that I am excited about is actually just AR. I like the mixture of real life plus added stuff. And that's where I would say my excitement is, as far as like if a Miley or somebody came to me for a video, that's what I would be talking about. I'd be like, how do we make this blend to where you can't quite figure out what's real and what's not? And there's definitely a lot of real elements in it. And so actually on the virtual production thing, I want to bring up, there's 2 other big virtual production shows where I did top to bottom design of the whole stage. And everything. Oh, actually one wasn't virtual production, but it was a lot of live touch designer. That was that Marvel Audemars Piguet show. Matthew Reagan and Ian were on that show with me.
Sorry, I'll give it a sec. I think this is big airplane. This airplane is actually covering up, is muffling a bit. Okay, I think you might be good now. Sorry, go ahead. So you're saying which show was the second one?
So actually, and I'd have to find the sizzle because it was like weird right stuff. But sorry, the one show I was thinking of that I did with Matthew, we had a live auction engine and all kinds of fun stuff, but it wasn't tracked camera, it was an AR. But so the Verizon show I wanted to bring up because we did this thing and I had never seen anyone do it. I've not seen anyone do it since. I think we're the only people that have done it this way, but we did a live hit to the stadium at SoFi, and we used it in our XR world, but it's not a game engine, it's a real shot from the exact same perspective.
Oh, hold on, wait a second. So you took the video feed, put it in the real stadium, had a camera there.
In the same position. Okay. So
yeah.
So then we started off the bit, and this is in the Verizon 5G Ultra show. They were advertising it on Kimmel and shit, but essentially it's like just a little movie of all the celebrities that have Verizon contracts and they have to kiss the ring at the end of the year and do a little appearance.
Oh yeah.
It's that show, right? So we did that show for them, me and Aggressive, and or me with Aggressive. That was actually an Aggressive show. That's like my sister company, right? For people that don't know. And so, but in that show, one of the things that was really cool, and it was the MBD, the never been done thing that the agencies love. So we had the setting. It starts out with host, and we've got the lines of the football field on the floor, but they go kind of just into darkness. And then there's a window. So at first you see in the window, you see the woman standing on the field in SoFi Live, but you just see her waist up in the window. And then the window just like pulls back. And then the whole floor and the stage and everything is the field, and all the lines are all lined up. And our host in our LED stage is standing on the field. Now, the nice thing then is we didn't have to build that field in Unreal or Notch or anything. And when you look behind her, there's like people painting lines, and there's grass.
That's
and there's
awesome.
Like birds and all this stuff. And there's all this stuff that you could never model and make it look
yeah.
like it would never be that real. So that excites me. And there's also some technology out there that they're using for sports right now, where people are running cameras remote, and the latency is like really good. Like they're literally following tennis with joysticks and stuff that are in a different location across the country.
Oh wow.
And they're running like robo head, really nice cameras and stuff. So put those two things together, you get two cameras that are moving the same perspective in two locations. You don't need a game engine. You can literally just transport that setting.
You have the real world.
Yeah. And so that was a really cool thing with the Verizon show that we just did, like last December or whatever, November. And that moving towards that, like merging, like putting two environments in one place / the blending of kind of digital and real worlds. I will say, and it's partly just pandemic, it's a few things, but I do not want to sit in a black box anymore. Like, I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not never, but I just mean just right now, that's not the tip I'm on. I'm trying to shoot stuff outside, but if people are coming to you still for cool tech, now we're back to compositing effects and how do I mess with force perspective, and I literally go back and start just watching like Michel Gondry again. It's like all this stop motion and paper art, and like that. The pandemic has just caused me, as far as an interest thing, to go that direction.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, just for folks to kind of remember, and this is going back to what you were saying, like really early on in the talk about words mean different things to the different industries, because I feel like your version of augmented reality is not like the let me pick up my iPhone and point it at a Pepsi can. It's more of digitally augmented reality, or an in-camera augmented reality. Or I think like those might be, if for just folks that are watching, what they're imagining is not like point this at a Coke can and see somebody pop out.
Yeah, I'm talking like watch a music video that is very clearly shot in a natural setting, and then you start seeing stuff that's blended in there.
Yeah,
but
like
also
front
has
plate, back plate
parallax
techniques, but in a real kind of world type of thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is going to be very cool to see. I think, to your point, that's probably going to be something that's going to be really interesting, is as things are opening up again and people are moving. Because I think the virtual production technology acceleration was huge, right? Like in terms of what people were doing in broadcast before to what they do on a regular day-to-day in a broadcast. Like, oh my God, like, so, and now that they're going to take it back out at the real world, I think it's going to make some really like exciting projects and exciting work to be coming out, which is like what you're, I think, kind of talking about being excited about.
Yeah, concert tours and stuff. I mean, there's a couple of tours out this summer that are, what's his name? Tyler the Creative, like people that are going like very narrative and really telling a story with like theater style, on stage. I hope we get to like an interesting mix, because honestly, I think the real magic of what we learned from XR, honestly, I think it's the camera tracking. Like my
Camera
favorite,
tracking is huge. I think it's gonna
that's my,
change a lot of stuff.
yeah, it's my favorite thing about all of it. And
Yeah.
like, it's just, okay, now when I go to shoot a video, I don't even need LED or nothing. I'm going to drop a marker and I'm going to drop an origin so that in post, I at least know where I'm at, and I can like do all kinds of better stuff than what it used to be, like just trying to 2D composite everything, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Or do optical tracking, right? Like the optical tracking work, but
yeah,
they were never like really as native or as much information as you needed to really like get in there.
yeah. So yeah, the camera track is actually my favorite, like kind of long lasting part of that technology.
So this kind of touches a little bit going into, because there's two other topics that I want to talk about. I think we've got enough time to get to both. And Butch, I see your question. Actually, I want to make Butch's question the last thing that we talked about today. So we'll come back to that. But I think talking about, like virtual production and even talking about new technologies and existing technologies, like, I guess it's two sides of the same coin. Like when it comes to the perspective of things that exist now in terms of Touch Designer, Notch, Unreals, Abletons, what kind of things excite you in this space? And then actually let's start there, because then we'll talk about like the newer, because we also got a question in the chat about like metaverse and stuff like that. And AI and ML stuff is really popping off. So I think we'll tackle that stuff as a separate thing. But in terms of like right now, are there stuff that's, whether it's Touch Designer, Notch, Unreal, that's really exciting you and you're like, oh, I really want to like dive into that feature?
The pangolin shot.
Oh yeah, you are a laser man. You're a laser man. Can you believe I'm gonna self-report myself? I've seen lasers. I've sent people patches for lasers. I've never touched a laser or
Really?
had. I
Not
know.
even at like my house. I guess you haven't hung out at my house.
I know.
Because at my house, there's lasers. They're fucking everywhere. There's literally a
I know.
table full of singles and scanners and stuff.
I've been meaning to just grab one and then like we'll make a bunch of fun YouTube videos and stuff like that. But
no, I
but
would
you
say
love lasers.
yeah, I love them. I work with them a lot, and I've bounced. I definitely went down the path of Touch Designer, Ether Dream. Like I loved Pangolin, and I love Pangolin, and I learned lasers with Pangolin. Sort of at first. I also learning the oscilloscope method from Robin. That's its own very specific thing. But it's also kind of the reverse engineering of the way the touch situation works now. It's just a vector, retrace like old TVs. But the Ether Dream Touch Designer method, when it first kind of happened, and I started messing with it, the thing is like there was a lot of tuning of like blank rates and all that stuff with the projector or with the scanner that Pangolin just takes care of it. It's just so much better at it because it's all these years and all this. But there were specific things that you could do in Touch you couldn't do in Pangolin at first. Then I started talking to Pangolin, and they were like, "Oh, if you want to do that, you do it in the Pango script thing. You can do this and this." And then now, this fucking Pangolin shop, like the fact that I can just send vectors in on the fly. I mean, now I basically have the best of both worlds. And
for folks like me, can you just explain what that workflow is like? So is that basically you're sending chop signals to Pangolin software that's also running on the system, and then Pangolin's doing the interface, kind of controlling the laser?
Yeah, so Pangolin is a really high-end, full-featured laser control software that we use on tours, and it allows us to do things like safety zones and blanking areas. And like if I'm throwing a laser at you, I can literally just take a portion of your face where your eyes are and say, never go above 20% here, but run my normal full show. And everywhere outside of that zone, it's brighter and stuff like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
It has all these features where you can't ensure your show if you don't have Pangolin. Like if you're on tour.
Wow, no way.
Because they have all these like
things all the rules, you can't go below this height. In here,
they have these shutters where like if it detects that the beam stops moving, it like just clamps shut so it doesn't blind anyone and all this kind of stuff, right? So there was a lot of stuff there where I was like, yeah, I can do some cool Tracy stuff, but so the workflow I'm talking about, you just get Touch into a vector, like into a SOP thing. And then I think the Pangolin thing, I'm not sure if it's a SOP or a chop, but essentially it just sprays right out to Pangolin a frame for frame vector.
Oh, that's cool.
And for those of you that don't know, lasers are vector, right? Like they don't fill anything in. They draw 60,000 to 90,000 points a second, and they're just on-off messages. And you literally just have two mirrors that are moving a merged beam. So you have to, everything you draw is a vector in laser world. Now, that being said, though, aligning your projection raster exactly corner to corner with your laser frame raster, and then using something, say a trace stop on a live feed of video, and then spraying both, you end up with highlight traces of your projection image with the, right? So that technique started to happen. Chris Cunningham was doing a little bit. There's some people that are doing it pretty custom. Now that Touch has made this chop or stop, whichever one it is, where you just pass straight to it. Right now, that's the most exciting thing to me, because it takes a lot of my work I've already done and gives me ways of, because I actually, it's funny, I pitched this to Azealia Banks like 12 years ago. I drew up this whole stage of this like occult witchy thing that was LED with projection fabric and then lasers hitting it. And I wanted to mix the qualities of the light of the LED and the projection and laser all together, all rastered together. And with all these occult symbols, I was going to do like upside down crosses and all this witch stuff.
Oh, that'd be cool.
And when you have the really bright laser highlight, you know, of the LED and all that kind of stuff,
it's a special effect. Yeah, it's a special effect.
Yeah, and they just didn't have the money for it. But like I've been wanting to mix this like laser projection thing for a while, and I was doing it in my living room, just on the wall, literally like a little Optima projector, a 1-watt scanner, and I was figuring out, oh, this works. And I was driving all the triggers and stuff from Ableton or whatever. And then I kind of put that away for a while, and I've just been designing lasers just on their own, like not with touch, just purely as a lighting planner. And then at Mutech this year, I got to say, I went to AV Visions or A Visions one night, and there's a whole crew of us there, and man, there was a few different pieces where they were doing this like noise texture art stuff, where it was definitely a generative draw in. It's like not really something you could hand draw. And then the laser stuff was just popping trace highlights, and it was all just like building across the whole screen together, where the laser was kind of leading the edge and then the projections like drawing in behind it. So really beautiful stuff. And it just inspired me. And the thing was, I was talking to somebody at Mutech, and they're like, yeah, have you checked out the pangolin chop or saw, whatever it is? And I was like, wait, what? I was like, I can just pass a frame to pangolin now? You know, it's like, I didn't even know this feature existed. And I had been doing like hacky stuff with PangoScript. So now I'm really excited to go back to that and start using those together. Literally, once I get home from New York, that's like one of the first things I'm doing in my living room, is like hooking all that up, because I'm using that on my show in October.
And Greg's in the chat mentioning that Pangolin Chop's input is SOP or chop, so you can feed either one depending on what kind of setup you're using. So that's gonna, I think you're gonna have a lot of fun with that.
Greg's in the chat.
Yeah. We got a lot of folks.
Well, I saw Isabel in there. Yeah. And yeah, I was sitting right there with Greg and Isabel and Crystal, a bunch of people, Marcus. We were all there watching the same stuff. Yeah.
So I think we know there's a lot of folks in lasers, and one day I'll get induced into the laser club. But looking forward a little bit, just technology in general, and like what you think is gonna touch a little bit our industry or change our industry. I know you've been messing around a lot with AI, ML art. Someone in the chat was asking about, a couple thoughts about metaverse and its impact on new media art, stuff like NFTs and crypto. What kind of, if you had to take those three and say this one, which one do you pick right now?
Well, for what, like money making, or that I think it's going to be popular, or what?
I would even leave it up to you. Interest, because I think they're all going to have money. Okay. I mean, these are hype stuff has money. That's like the track with the trains on it. If there's trains, there's money. But I think like what interests you? Why does it maybe interest you? How do you think it's because I think knowing you, the thing that's going to interest you is really going to probably have a really long-term impact as well.
Oh, I appreciate that. Those are kind words.
Hey, real talk.
Well, I mean, long-term impact, the biggest long-term impact is going to be AI. And like I've been playing with Midjourney for maybe 4 or 5 months, DALL-E maybe a month or two. Just had to wait forever to get DALL-E. And for me, like, I said I was recently kind of looking at some of the job offers at some of these agencies. If I were working at an ad agency right now and we were not using AI for our decks and a lot of that stuff, we are behind, like straight up, And I think the metaphor that I really like I came across was AI is to a graphic designer what a calculator is to a mathematician.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think it's a very good metaphor, because a lot of people are kind of scared of it right now. And honestly, DALL-E is definitely the most commercially viable as far as what it gives you if you're trying to make corporate money. Now, Midjourney really makes some beautiful stuff sometimes, despite
feels like artwork. A lot of the stuff coming out of it.
But I think you know, I've already experienced, like when I was trying to come up with this McQueen thing, and I had some ideas that were kicking at me from this MIT artist and stuff, and I just started putting prompts in as a brainstorming thing, and it's so powerful. The other thing I think is ridiculous is just your iteration of examples. Like
Mm.
there's just no way to make as many iterations as fast as like what this thing does, and ultimately you're going to throw 90% of them away. So that's why I also like letting it crank out logo iterations and that kind of stuff that I can then show to client and be like, hey, you want choices? Here's 300 choices. You know, it took me an hour. Like,
I think that's an amazing concept too, because you know, something we've been doing with the HQ recently, and especially folks that are in the HQ Pro probably know this, but we've really had a lot of like new art courses. So we had a media art history, we got a new media trends course, to kind of like fill some of that richness of what are we even doing, why are we even doing it. And when I was watching those courses, like really cool was one of the artists featured, Vera Molnir, who we have a YouTube video where Crystal is in the chat, was recreating some of her really early, because she was really early in the computer arts scene. And she was, and this was and by all means, anyone in the chat who knows art history, please chime in on the years, but this is very early computer years. And exact same thing happened then that I feel like you're talking about now, which is this idea that back then there was artists who were saying, you know, computers and digital, it's not art, or is it going to replace us? Like those kind of two extremes. And her approach to talking about it was very similar to what you were saying, which is that the artist without that tool maybe iterates 20 times or 30 times before you run out of energy. And that's the amount of iterations you get, and you pick from that. And her approach was that she's like, I can give this computer my artistic rules. And when we're talking about the computer, I mean, it's just like, it's like what we take for granted, instancing and touch designer. You hit the screen with a spitball and you got a beautiful instancing setup. This was like cutting edge technology, like at the time, right? And her idea was that I could, to your point, I could have the computer do 70,000 iterations for me. And then my job as the artist becomes, where in that 70,000 is there something interesting and compelling? And then how do I keep exploring that instead of me just trying to make 20 to 30 of what the computer's 70,000 iterations were? And I think that sounds similar, I think, to what you're talking about here with machine learning art, which is that idea that, because I also don't think, yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be some level of jobs and positions that might get replaced by AI art. But I think even Josue was saying it in our session that we have for the HQ Pro folks, but like AI ML art also is that. And I thought it was a very good example. It's that, and because I think taking it away from us makes it easier to see the example. When it's too close to home, we don't like realize the example, like you're saying with the graphic, what calculators are for kind of like engineers and math people. So he was saying, like, if there was a version of Midjourney that just made music, that given the same tool to a professional musician and like pro high level producer, and to, you know, me or Josue or somebody who, you know, is not that, their result is going to be better and more compelling and amazing and transcend different kind of artistic boundaries, where ours is just going to sound like something generated by you know, the whatever the standard algorithm comes out of that system. So I think that's like a really interesting thing you're touching on there. So and I think what's interesting about what you're saying too is I'd like to hear more about is, so you're saying that from an agency perspective, if they're not using it, you're already kind of behind. From your experience kind of using these platforms, where do you think that use case is? Like you were saying, iterating on like logo designs, and you were using it a little bit in the brainstorming process of thinking about ideas, but like
So,
where
yeah,
else do you see this using?
I think in the creative brainstorming pitch deck space, it has a huge functionality. I also, where you see it, where actually jobs, well, I don't think, I mean, jobs are going to be lost, but it's not like they're going to totally go away. I think what used to take 3 or 4 people is now just going to take 1 person. That job still has to happen. It's just going to take less people. But is for backgrounds. So like games and movies now, when they're like, hey, I need a coffee ad on that fucking thing, and I need a drugstore ad,
and a matte painting of this in the background,
and it's just a bang, and it's like really good. Like that is really, really useful, because it's stuff where you're your artistic need is low, you know, and really what you need is just something that makes sense and looks really nice and is not copyrighted. Like that world, which is a lot of just kind of background population, right? Like we have these cityscapes, all these billboards and everything, we just need something on them. It's going to be hugely useful for that. But that's also, like I said, that's a place where some jobs are going to go away, to be honest, you know. And
an interesting thing to think about too is like as you're expressing it, those also might be the jobs that nobody, like they're good because they exist, but nobody really wants to do those jobs in terms of, I mean, those are the jobs that when we talk about like I do this job for the money, I think a lot of them fall into that category of if I had a tool that would just let me do it and I could do the fun stuff and the creative stuff. I think even most artists probably take that route versus, yeah, let me go make a fake ad for a billboard in the background of this like 3D environment.
Yeah. And honestly, it's like it does certain things really well and it does other things not well. Obviously faces and all that stuff are really tricky. I still end up at the end of my experimentations, usually with something that I then want to take and then remake, you know, or modify or mess with it, or just kind of use it as a, like, okay, that's cool, so let's make this thing over here. That gave me a really good idea. The exception to that, I will say though, is like, you know, some of the stuff Crystal made, just see with the quartz and the wood and the geometry and stuff, like that's fucking, dude, that could be the wrapper on a candy or anything. I mean, there's so many great things that could be.
And for folks that don't know this reference, it's from a blog post that Crystal posted. I'll put a link in the chat. Sorry, continue though.
Well, I should say a lot of the stuff that she's been making, whether it's interior looks or architectural stuff or whatever, that stuff I find actually you could use it right as it is. A lot of the stuff I've been asking the AI to do are a bit more conceptual, and I've also been messing around. Like I love trying to figure out how it understands emotions and things like that. Like what?
Yeah. You've watched Blade Runner a few too many times. You're voice confing the system already.
Yeah. So I'm totally just putting in like one word, like alluring or stress or something, you know, just kind of seeing what it comes up with. But no, she's actually found a lot of things where I'm like, that's done, you know, for some corporate advertisement or something like that. Now I think people are always going to be tough. It's always going to be hard to get like a person with the right expression, with the right thing that you're looking for. I think you're always going to need that. And yeah, I do think what you said about, you know, you give a musician a tool and you give a rando a tool, it's the same thing for us too. Like if you understand AI, you're going to get better results out of that thing. You know? Or
if you also understand art and media art and new media art, you're going to know you'll learn how to figure out the tool to make the results better than if we gave a musician, no offense to musicians in the chat, but you know, for the figure of speech, if you give the music person who doesn't know anything about visuals a visual tool, I don't think there's going to be any comparison between the outcomes. Or there might be comparison, but I think it'll be compared. You know,
it'll just be different.
I'm a big Glenn Gould head, and he was all about recording technology and new technologies in music and the democratization of music, taking us back to a golden age of music where everybody was an artist. Because they can play music and understand the music that they're hearing at a better level instead of just being purely kind of a consumer that doesn't understand what's actually happening in the music. I'm hopeful that kind of machine learning art maybe does a little bit of that, where people who never have made art before can hop in there and like have a good time, like interacting with a system that makes cool visuals in an easy fashion, and they start to get creative. Which then my hope here, obviously idealism hope here, is that them making that gives them a better appreciation of what a skilled craftsperson is then outputting out of the same system, right?
Yeah, you know, it's funny, you motivated a couple thoughts here that actually lead to just this idea of, if we're getting close to time, I'm like, one of the most important things I want to say to everyone is
we go, bro. Keep going, keep running.
Well, so I was at a movie premiere the other night, this movie 18 and Over that my homie Jimmy directed. And it's an NFT. It was a movie that was funded by NFTs, and it's like a pop horror film. Yeah, Jimmy Giannopoulos, he was half of Lola Wolf. When I first met him, he was producing with Zoe Kravitz, with that band. And but he's like a director now. He's been doing all these like mobster movies and shit. And he just did this like pop horror movie. And anyway, my point was we were at the premiere the other night, and this woman was talking to me, and we were just, what do you do, like whatever. And then she starts saying, yeah, well, I got really into this new thing here, and she shows me on her phone. I was like, oh, that's Midjourney. And she was like, oh, you know about it, you know. And she starts telling me all about AI. And she was someone who had like zero experience, any kind of visual software, Photoshop or anything. I think I'm not sure, but like but the thing that I'll bring up about that is that I think right now we're in a funny place in our industry specifically, but any kind of graphic art or skill-based kind of industry where people are very jaded, and they're like, if someone like that comes up to them at a party, they're gonna be like, fuck this bitch, you know, like she doesn't know shit.
That would make you angry.
Yeah, and I just, please don't do that. Like if I could say that to just the world of jitter, don't do that. Like don't push away people that are getting inspired. You know, now if somebody comes up to you and they're like, I made this and I'm the best artist in the world, it's like, no, you're not.
We don't need you. Like if they did that, like, yeah, definitely, like, you know,
that's different
cups. But
yeah.
But
and then I also,
which is people getting inspired is a good thing for us.
It's a good thing
over time.
Yeah, like don't resist that. And also on the entertainment and production industry in general, this is a pet peeve of mine that I know you've heard me say, because you worked with previous toxic partners of mine. And is that one of the most common things in entertainment industry, television, all of it in general, and also in, you know, interactive art and museum stuff, all of it is the thing where if you get more and more experienced, that means you've seen a lot, and then that things don't impress you. And I come across so many veterans in the television world, especially, and then a lot of music touring. It's actually kind of bad too, like the guys that have just done everything, you know, the McGuires and the Silent House and stuff like that. And I'm not saying those people in particular, but I'm just saying in that world where you do a lot of just the crazy shit and you're always around celebrities and all that kind of thing, I meet a lot of people where they just become too cool for school and nothing ever impresses them, and they're always kind of like, yeah, whatever, I've seen cooler. That shit is so toxic. Yeah, I hate that shit so bad. And I would say my success continuing, and anybody's success continuing, is staying inspired, you know. And when I think back to amazing directors I've worked with, Fabian and Peter Sellers, like, you know, they're 50, 60 years old, and they still have this like childlike wonder about what they're doing.
Peter's hilarious.
Love it, you know. And so it's like, yeah, I just wanted to mention that too, as we're talking about kind of long-term stuff. It's like, don't get jaded, man. Like I can be fascinated by just like an old light hanging in a tree and the shadows it makes and stuff, you know what I mean? Like, and that's important just to all your work, shit, your life in general, stress.
Life in general, mindfulness meditation, I'm a big proponent. That I think it helps a lot with that, being present. Huge, exactly.
You know, another one,
what you're saying,
just popped in my head too. Another general concept for anybody doing any kind of art industry, where they're don't take yourself so seriously. Embrace being silly, embrace doing things that you would make fun of yourself. You know, like don't be so like where you wouldn't do something stupid, you know. And then be willing to throw shit away. A lot of people lately have been asking me, they're like, dude, I haven't seen, like, where's the music, where's the stuff, what's going on, you haven't posted anything on Instagram in months. And I'm like, there's literally hundreds of sketches all in folders on my computer, and a lot of it I just delete. Like at a certain point, you know. I do believe in the dailies thing. I really try to just sit down and make some garbage for like 1 or 2 hours as often as I can when I have time. I think it's really useful, but I think a big part of that is throwing it away, actually, and not taking anything too serious, because you got to make 50 different things before you get two really special ones, and it's not special.
Actually, and that's a really interesting concept. Like it's going to sound like in a new course in the HQ Pro that we had, one of our teachers, Eddie Kistler, was talking about, you know, the course is all about like a creative introduction to audio engineering concepts. So it's like really useful that you can kind of understand what happens in the audio process without being an engineer. So you can at least like communicate with those folks and be creative. And he had this idea of seeds, and you want to plant lots of seeds. And especially when you think about like the best musicians, their first thing that they recorded wasn't probably the thing that made it on the album, and they would plant hundreds of seeds and water all of them and try and finish all of them. Some would then not make it, but the ones that became trees are, the golden records, we know about, and John Coltrane records and all kinds of like these kind of things that stand the test of time. So there's definitely an idea. Like I think Dailies helps with that kind of thought process of let me make a lot of stuff, but I have to know that not all of it's going to be really great. Some of it's just going to be doo-doo. The big chunk of the medium area is going to be like, cool, that's good for client work. And then there's going to be a piece of like, this is like art that I'm proud of that I made and I really want to share and talk about and stuff like that. So I want to hit our last question topic before we wrap it up. This is a question that Butch was asking. As a self-made orphan, I relate. How did you manage to scrape together money to learn and practice simultaneously between so many commercial softwares, all out of pocket? Did paywalls deter you? I think it's a really interesting question. And I think we both probably have, coming from music backgrounds and even more kind of interesting and kind of longer journey that you've had on the come up. I thought it was an interesting topic to end on. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first? What do you prefer?
I can go first. For me, there's a very specific moment where I went from pirate software to purchase software. And I will say, for a while there, being a hacker and a computer guy and all that stuff, like I was way back, like what was it, the Merc boards and stuff, like all the old text. You get
Juarez. Does anybody in the chat remember Juarez?
Totally. Yep. So I had like $30,000. I had like all the Waves plugins, the Acid. I mean, also student. I will say, at IU we got I got Acid Pro for $5. I got Ableton for nothing, I think, because I was a student. So there was a couple of things I got early on where I had a legit software, but all my audio plugins, did I pay for Macs? Oh no, you know what? I used to format my computer every 30 days.
Oh my God.
Because Max MSP, because one thing, I used to format my computer all the time. It just goes faster. And I used to do a lot of like really dicey hack stuff that I always wanted to wipe it. And for a long time, I was wiping my computer every 30 days for the Max MSP license because it's fully functional for a month, right? And then I was on tour with Karsh Calais. We were doing like Hollywood Bowl and shit, right? And I was running Ableton and I had this crazy setup that was all this mixed meter, because in school, ethnomusicology was like a strong suit minor of mine. And I studied Indian music theory very heavily.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And I'm a specialist like in ancient Indian music. So, so then Karsh hired me because he had a US tour. Medieval pundits couldn't come on from India, and his tour is all this weird mixed meter, like 13, 16 phrases and
quarter tones and everything, right? Yeah.
Well, and you have to like advance Ableton scenes inside of a very complicated counting structure.
Oh my God, that sounds like crazy inside Ableton doing that.
Well, I was doing that plus running visuals for the screens, and I'm watching them for hand signals of advancing, because the songs are like basically improvisational sections. And you have to be looking for signals of when they want to move in and out of different sections. And I was trying to juggle visuals and all this stuff. So anyway, that tour, Ableton, the version of Ableton I had at the time was Pirate. And I had a day where it was like 2 days out from rehearsal and I was setting a bunch of stuff up and it just shit was broken. Like, and I was like, I need to be able to ask them, so like I bought Ableton. I sent them an email. They literally sent me a bug fix like 3 hours later and it all worked. And I had the new version and everything. And I was like, okay, this is why you buy software. Like, so that you can just hit them up and be like, this is broken. And then as far as software I bought, Touch Designer was one, Jitter I ended up paying for. And then those, honestly, Jitter and Touch Designer is what started to make me real money. And then I started buying more audio software and stuff, honestly, partially because of Anna. Like when she decided she wanted to learn Ableton, wanted to be a DJ, producer, all that stuff, I just started buying plugins just so that like we could make whatever music we wanted. But I started with pirate software, and I got to a point where I had a paying job and I was like, I need support. But in the beginning, it was pirate.
I think a lot of people, a lot of people, whether they admit it or not, have been down that road. Like I was cracking software. Oh my God. Oh my God.
What was like a sport back then,
It
like
was a little bit of like a me versus you situation,
I used
but
to
to
be
your
like,
point, I think you get to a point you're like, oh, okay, like you know what? For me, I think a big part of it was like I started doing development, and I'm like, oh my God, like if somebody stole my work, I'd be pissed.
yeah.
So then I'm like,
And
I'm
I,
gonna pay all these people. Like I'm not even using it. I always buy the latest version of Ableton. I open it once a year, but I'm just like, but that's
well,
I'm a different situation now, right? But hypothetically,
well, yeah, the karma thing's interesting because I'm not really like too much of a kind of new agey person, but
Hmm.
I will say that when I started paying for software, I started getting paid for software.
No
And
shit.
I was very conscious of that.
Yeah.
And exactly the reason you say, I was like, oh man, I'm like trying to sell this media service software. I'm like,
Mm.
can't be a hypocrite, and both of those two things kind of started happening at the same time.
Yeah. The one element I would put in there, and actually, I see a lot of Juarez in the chat. I mean, I remember downloading like Commander Keen 2 off Juarez
I was
or
gonna say, are
whatever,
people
like
putting
GTA
photos in?
1. No, no, no. I
Or I
don't know
mean,
if you
not
can
photos,
put,
but
yeah.
like doing the. I love
No, no,
ASCII art. I love
the
ASCII art.
SDR, no,
Yeah.
this is like Juarez, lol.
Oh, okay,
Um,
gotcha. I don't
but
get all the chat. I think
you don't get all the chat.
no,
Maybe you
it's
have
only
to
giving me
refresh.
certain ones. Yeah, but when I refresh it, all goes away. But yeah, by the way, that
Uh,
restream thing, like
I don't know.
chat.
We're on the cheapest plan. Come on. Uh,
You're a cheap bastard. You are.
I know. Well, this is going to lead exactly to what I was going to say right now, which is that whether it's from upbringing or stuff like that, like I have always been very, very conscious of spending money. And this even started. Crystal's in the chat. I mean, Crystal, like we're doing the event, and we're like, should we buy Sharpies? And I'm like, do we need to buy Sharpies? Like that. That's who.
That
That's
when I gave you shit over that too, I was texting.
yeah.
I was like, dude.
And I was like, hey, listen, if we need them, we'll buy them. But like, I'm the type of person who I don't even take the $4 to buy Sharpie for granted. I'm like, do we need Sharpies? Uh, just funny side story. Obviously, like whatever we do, we're gonna buy it. But that's kind of in my mind. So I still even to this day have that mindset that like all the things I have could disappear tomorrow. And I think that's a very similar mindset to when I was starting out because especially like us coming from music school, and we kind of joked about at the beginning, music making money in the music is mean streets out there,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
tough. Yeah.
and especially like us as trombone players, it's not like the instrument that everybody wants or needs. I remember the struggles of trying to hit those weekend gigs, playing the casinos,
Weddings,
weddings,
yeah,
like
the brass, but
whatever I could
Easter.
play. Easter. It makes you really appreciate. Yeah, I think I have a different view of credit cards than I think most people do. And I think that's kind of what. So I never really like. I don't think I've ever. Actually, I did max. Actually, nothing like I've maxed out credit cards a couple times. And in the tough years, I would say business ain't always like amazing.
Yeah.
That's a reality, but I think something that is in my mind whenever I'm spending money is priorities and what do I need, what do I want, and what'll make me feel good. And I think if you only index into one of them, life can feel very hard. So I feel like you want to try and balance those things, need, wants, and makes you feel nice. Because sometimes you just like me getting a massage is a thing I have to justify in my head still. Like that's kind of like how much of a stingy person I could be. Sometimes I have to justify self-care for myself. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm thinking about this person that asked this question that said they were like a self-made orphan kind of thing.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say to that person is actually, it's funny because this was a Facebook quote. Like I worked with Facebook a lot back in the early 2010 to 12, 13 time. And there was this thing about content is king, right? And I will say too, it's like, well, depending on where on that kind of technologist or artist fork, this person may fall. Okay, now this is therapy too, right? So my therapist, my survival method to come out of, because we haven't even touched on that, my crazy ass childhood, overachieving and
oh my God, yeah, preach.
That kind of thing, right? Like, but I will say, like, that is, as funny as it sounds, like I don't know how healthy it is to tell people to do this, but like I think if you're one of those people like I was, like I'm uniquely qualified to just go fucking hard, and like I wanted it. like I'm passionate, you know, and I wanted it. And I prided myself when I was younger about not needing sleep. I had days and days without sleeping.
Me and you both, remember? We both worked till literally me and you worked like a 20 hour and neither of us complained or wanted to go home really. It was just at the end we're like, I guess we should like leave for like a couple hours or some shit.
Come back. Yeah.
We'll come back in a few hours.
But content is king. The thing is like, you know, nothing is going to outweigh just quality, you know, and like, and that doesn't even require money or, you know, I can walk down the street and see a street graph spray on a wall and just be like, God, you know, like, and so also just kind of finding who you are and your voice and all that stuff is how you get ahead of the money, right? Because somebody can sit down in like a free or Blender, for example, free. Like Blender's amazing, you know, and it's totally free. So I would say, yeah, that too. Just like find your voice and just make like quality stuff. From what I've seen, kind of basically falls into place from there. I mean, there's definitely talented people that aren't successful, but it's usually there's some other component of who they are that
roadblocks themselves kind of a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing I would add to that is, and I just would agree, yes, paywalls have deterred me before. Out of pocket usually, but sometimes credit card and a prayer, you know what I'm saying? Like you got to put that 600 down.
You don't have to pay them back.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say some crazy, you know, I mean, the HQ doesn't officially sanction that last comment, but you know, credit card and a prayer is in my early days really got me through some tough times when I had no liquid capital, no money, and you're kind of just like, I'm making the bet on myself, and the bank, and oh man, you know how long I've ridden some interest for before, like that 29.99% credit card, or not, now it's not better because I'm a little bit older, but like at the time it was like crazy interest rates that you're just carrying for months. You're paying 3 times the thing, but I'm like, I'm going to bet on myself because I think I can do this. I'm going to grind it out. And I'm a grinder,
Well, I'm stepping in and just being like, well, don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, well, I just like,
well, don't do it for like 10 grand, but if it's like $500 or $600 to like buy you're going to make that back pretty quick.
Well, one job, like ideally, well, and also, I don't know, it's tough, like, because like what we do is very valuable. And I know a lot of people don't get paid enough sometimes. And I try to set a really good example of like what we should get paid. Matthew Reagan, great about that. You're great about that.
Read our blog. I talk about money all the time and everyone gets tired of me talking about money, but like, for God's sakes, just, it helps so much.
But it is also true though. It's like, you know, one job can like change your life. It did for me a couple of times, you know? Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one because it's always like you got to tell someone to be scrappy, but you don't want to be like, hey, fuck up your life or fuck up your credit.
Exactly.
But like I've taken so many huge risks.
Oh my God.
And I tell people often, like, I'm not even supposed to be alive right now. Like most of the people around me when I was young did not think I was going to live this long. So, I mean, risk is a part of it. Even when you're just a software person sitting in a room, you know, life has risk.
Yeah, it does. But I think if you look at myself, Brandon, and I know a lot of other folks in our industry are going to have this same thought process. It's very possible, and it's not as hard as I think a lot of people feel out there. And there's so many good resources, like we're saying, whether you have money to pay for them or not. There's YouTubes, there's blogs that are free, there's all kinds of stuff that really can help. Communities that are amazing and share constantly.
I mean, Unreal's free. Blender's free.
Unreal is free. Blender's free. Like you can pop off.
My God,
your first couple projects in there. There you go. And then you can buy Touch Designer and stuff later if that becomes the case.
Yeah, and I'll say even, you know, as far as job security too, like you can't find enough Unreal developers right now. And,
oh my God, you can't find enough any developers.
Yeah, everybody's looking for people, and it's like there's work there.
100%. Sure. Okay, so we're getting to the end of the show here. We're a little over time. I know me and you like talking about that philosophical life stuff, so I thought we had to get that one in there for our man Butch. I'm going to put your link in the chat here for folks that want to learn more information. Is there something you'd like to leave them with, or somewhere additionally that you'd like to send folks so that they can learn more about you, get in touch with you in any kind of way? The floor is yours by all means.
I mean, for me, like my website, my Instagram, and my LinkedIn are kind of the most updated places. Admittedly, my Instagram, my website are about a year behind right now as far as shows. But that's the place I am the most often. LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to learn a little bit.
Mm.
But
I'm
then
putting all the
otherwise,
links in the chat. All the links are in the chat.
okay, cool. Yeah. And then, my sister companies, it's pretty easy to find aggressive stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe put aggressive.tv up there because that's
Yes, sir.
we're all partners, and half my work is on that website too. What's on my personal website, I will say, there's stuff on here not for money, like the San Francisco Youth Symphony thing, the Mela, the Lion Babe video. Like, there's a bunch of things on there that were passion projects that ended up causing a lot of other stuff to happen.
Yeah,
is the fun thing about the personal site. But no, I mean, those are pretty easy.
So before we end it off, I'm gonna hit y'all again. If you enjoyed what you're seeing here, you want to take your career up a level, turn it into a full-time career, get your journey up and running. The HQ Pro, which is our kind of paid portion of our school, which has over 150 hours of high quality trainings by some of the best teachers in the industry. We have a private Facebook group where we're helping everybody kind of develop their journeys. Myself, Matthew Reagan, and really high-end folks are in there supporting folks. And we got features.
That's my support. Like, for what it's worth, before the HQ ever even existed, Matthew and Elbers, and you were the people I called when I was stuck. You and Malcolm.
Hell yeah. So you can get that right now, 50% off your first month, which is really good, because if you were thinking about it, you're tight on a budget, you're like, I don't know if it was right for me, get a whole month in there, 50% off. Listen, I tell you that you go in for 1 month, you want to cancel after that, like, hey, you come for 1 month, come chill, that's no problem for us. I think you can get a lot even out of a month. Right now is the best time to do that. So I'm going to put a link in the chat for that. And then I'll end my shill right there. Thank you, my friend, for joining us. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. I know me and you could like sit down and chat like all day about nothing on everything. And I'm thankful that you're able to share your experiences, your knowledge, your wisdom over all these years with all the folks watching. And I'm sure this video is going to get a lot of likes and traction after, just because we hit on so many really interesting, important topics. So thank you so much for joining me. And folks for watching, thank you for watching. I know it's Friday afternoon. So by all means, enjoy your weekends, and we'll see you in the next one of these sessions.
Yeah, awesome. Super fun, dude.
My pleasure, bro. My pleasure. Thanks, folks. Have a good weekend.